Picture a story where wishes come true. A whopping $500 million windfall and control of a booming business. That's the reality that unfolded for us as Nora, my sister-in-law, joyfully celebrated our family's newfound wealth. Among the staff, whispers spread like wildfire as they soaked in the news. With a triumphant tone, Nora announced, "Quiet, please. It's time for my husband to step into his role at the company and claim his $3 million share." Her words triggered laughter among the employees, intrigued by the sudden twist. In the midst of the excitement, my older brother Jack pored over legal papers passed to him by our family's lawyer. His face drained of color as he absorbed the contents of our father's will. "Take a look at this," he whispered to Nora, who gasped in shock as she read the document. "Hi there. I'm Stella, a 26-year-old who's been deeply involved in my dad's business since I was little. I've seen him build it up from scratch into the success it is today. Even when things got tough at the start, he never gave up. And that really inspired me. As the business grew, I wanted to help out, especially since my mom handled a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. My parents always encouraged me to choose my own path after high school, but I knew I wanted to be part of Dad's legacy. That feeling only got stronger as I got older. When I finally joined the family business, I was lucky to have Leo, a longtime employee, show me the ropes. He taught me all about how things work without treating me differently because I'm the boss's kid. Learning from him gave me a real understanding of what we do and how to do it well. Meanwhile, my brother Jack, who's just a year older than me, was off studying management, planning to take over from Dad one day. He'd often talk about it with his friends, confident that he was meant to lead the company someday. This tale peels back the layers of family dynamics, inheritance, and the pursuit of success within a business setting. It challenges the idea that privilege equals entitlement, instead highlighting the importance of earning one's place through hard work and dedication. As the story unfolds, unexpected twists shine a light on the true meaning of legacy and responsibility. My brother Jack led a life cushioned by stability and certainty, the envy of many of his friends. "You're so lucky," they'd say, eyeing the secure future Jack had courtesy of our family's business. The conversation often turned to me, his younger sister, sparking curiosity about any potential rivalry for control of the company. "Oh, my sister. She's around, but she's more a behind-the-scenes type," Jack would explain, somewhat brushing off any speculation. Jack had his own approach to getting ready for leadership, spending extravagantly and enjoying socializing under the guise of gaining management experience. He knew that being the future president made him popular, especially with women attracted to his status. Among many admirers, he picked Nora, the most dazzling of them all, as his wife. Their wedding was a spectacle, followed by a lavish honeymoon and the building of a grand mansion to start their luxurious life together. Nora seemed perfectly content in her role, living in luxury and always having things her way with Jack. Compared to her, my life seemed ordinary, quietly working alongside my mother in the company. I was happy with my behind-the-scenes role, far from the glitz and glamour Nora enjoyed. During family gatherings, Nora often looked at me with a hint of superiority in her laughter. "You don't really fit the image of a CEO's daughter," she'd say, finding the idea amusing. I never understood Nora's fascination with extravagant living, a lifestyle that felt foreign to me. She probed, unable to grasp why someone born into wealth would show little interest in flaunting it. "Living so simply despite your family's riches, I just don't get it," she'd say, as if the idea of not showcasing wealth was beyond her comprehension. This difference in our lifestyles highlighted our contrasting values and viewpoints. While Nora valued material possessions and social status, I found fulfillment in quietly contributing to our family's legacy. It wasn't about money or titles for me. It was about being part of something meaningful. Despite being the daughter of the company's president, as my brother often pointed out, I didn't seek attention or special treatment. I believed in treating my colleagues with respect, just like anyone else. My approach to work and relationships within the company was rooted in humility and mutual learning. I recognized that many of my coworkers had skills and knowledge surpassing mine, and I respected the importance of every role within our organization. My brother held firm to the belief that a boss must always maintain an air of superiority to command respect from their team. He was surprised by my perspective and criticized my approach, insisting that a true leader should assert dominance and delegate mundane tasks to others. According to him, This mindset separated the real leaders in our family from the rest. When I tried to defend my viewpoint, stressing the importance of respecting all team members regardless of their role, my brother quickly dismissed my arguments. He claimed that such thinking would make me unappealing to potential partners. Nora joined in, suggesting that my attitude and outlook on life would leave me alone forever, advising me to change to become more attractive. My brother even threatened my job security once he took over the company, highlighting our vastly different values and approaches to leadership and personal relationships. Following the uncomfortable confrontation, my mother stepped in with her support, reminding me of the value I brought to the company and advising me not to let my brother's criticisms affect me. My father also made his disapproval of my brother's attitude clear with his stern demeanor. It was evident that my parents didn't share my brother and Nora's views, leading to a tense period where they avoided our family home. Reflecting on the strain caused by this disagreement, I realized that despite our differences, it was crucial for each of us to stay true to our principles. While my brother and Nora continued their lavish lifestyle, frequenting fancy restaurants and luxurious resorts to maintain a certain image, I remained dedicated to my values. I focused on making meaningful contributions to our family business, cherishing the importance of humility and teamwork that I had learned over time. Jack was on track to become the president of our father's company, a role he was being prepared for as our father worked diligently to expand his business. One evening at home, my father suddenly felt intense chest pains. Worried, I urged him to stay calm while I called for an ambulance. In those tense moments, he directed me to a letter in a drawer, insisting, "Stella, read this. If anything happens to me, the lawyers will handle the rest." His words were barely out before he lost consciousness, and despite being rushed to the hospital, he passed away without regaining consciousness. Jack and Nora, my brother and his wife, were abroad during this crisis and missed being with our father during his final moments. They returned from their vacation 3 days later, just in time for the funeral. Jack's comment, "We're just glad we made it on time. Never thought Dad would pass while we were away," struck me as insensitive. Their casual arrival and failure to acknowledge the efforts my mother and I put into organizing the funeral were deeply disheartening. I was surprised by his criticism, especially since my mother and I had carefully chosen the menu together. I told him I didn't appreciate being told what to do, explaining that his behavior showed a lack of understanding of true leadership. Jack didn't stop at bossing me around. He also gave orders to the employees, including Leo, a highly respected member of our company. When I heard Jack ordering Leo, I stepped in and scolded my brother for his disrespectful attitude. Jack argued back, asking why he should have to show humility to an employee and insisting that he deserved more respect as the future president. Nora supported Jack's actions and threatened to fire me if I continued to challenge him. Suddenly, a man interrupted our heated argument. He introduced himself as the lawyer who had been handling our father's affairs, including his will, something my father had mentioned to me before he passed away. This news caught Jack and Nora's attention, especially when the topic of inheritance came up. They eagerly welcomed the lawyer, hoping to learn more about the fortune they expected to inherit. As they discussed the inheritance, Jack became emotional, asking about the rumored $500 million. Nora couldn't contain her excitement at the thought of such wealth, seeing it as their ticket to a dream life. This announcement caused a buzz among the employees, but Nora quickly hushed them, proudly anticipating their imminent rise to power. This situation really showed the contrast in values and priorities within our family, especially between Jack and Nora's focus on material wealth and my dedication to honoring my father's legacy with respect and humility. The lawyer's arrival signaled the start of a new chapter, one that would reveal my father's true intentions for his inheritance and the company's future. When everyone expected the company and a $500 million inheritance to go to Jack, the contents of the will caused quite a stir among the employees. One of them couldn't help but laugh, and soon it became clear why. As Jack and Nora read the will, they were shocked to discover that the entire company was to be passed on to me, the eldest daughter. Jack was visibly stunned, his face turning pale as he protested, insisting there must be some mistake. The lawyer present during this confrontation confirmed the legality of the will, which only made Jack more agitated and unwilling to accept the decision. He argued that our father must have been mentally unfit when making such choices, suggesting they were invalid. This attack on our father's judgment pushed me over the edge. I defended our father's honor and integrity, refusing to accept Jack's claim to lead the company. My brother reached his breaking point as I openly questioned his qualifications, highlighting his lack of contribution to the company's well-being. Jack and Nora defended themselves, claiming they had prepared for his presidency by building a luxurious mansion and living a lavish lifestyle. I countered, emphasizing that these surface-level actions didn't prove leadership or business sense. Furthermore, I revealed the letter from our father detailing the financial support he had given Jack, including the mansion and other extravagances, which was actually an advance on Jack's inheritance, significantly reducing his share. Nora panicked upon hearing this, realizing the implications of the will and letter. The whole situation played out as a clash between expectations and reality, exposing the deep divisions within our family over our father's company's legacy and the true qualities of leadership and responsibility. When the $500 million inheritance was mentioned, Nora's confusion and frustration were evident. Wait, so the whole inheritance is only worth $500 million? Have we really spent that much already? This doesn't seem fair, she lamented. An employee who had previously laughed stepped forward to clarify for Nora that the $500 million represented the company's value, not personal wealth available for inheritance. Nora struggled to understand this distinction, unable to grasp that company funds weren't meant to be divided up as personal inheritance. I explained to her that the company's wealth was meant for its growth and sustainability, not personal inheritance, meaning Jack's share of any personal inheritance would be minimal. This revelation visibly shook her, showing a clear misunderstanding of the difference between company assets and personal wealth. At this point, Jack seemed to have a moment of realization or perhaps denial. He turned to the employees, questioning their support for me as president over him, arguing that leadership was his birthright due to the charisma he believed he shared with our father. However, the silence that followed spoke volumes. None of the employees came to his defense. Leo, a veteran and respected figure in the company, then addressed Jack directly. He contrasted the genuine charisma and foundational legacy of our father with Jack's misplaced arrogance. Leo's words resonated, emphasizing a respect earned through actions and humility rather than entitlement. He pointed out Jack's absence and lack of contribution to the company's daily operations, dismissing Jack's excuses of networking as irrelevant to the real work needed to sustain and grow the business. In contrast, Leo praised my efforts to understand and contribute to the company from the ground up, acknowledging the sincerity and dedication I shared with our father. This endorsement from Leo and the collective agreement from other employees highlighted a shared acknowledgement of my suitability for leadership, based not on entitlement but on commitment and respect for the legacy and future of the company. Touched by their support, I felt a renewed sense of responsibility and gratitude. The employees' acknowledgement of my efforts and their trust in my leadership validated the path I had chosen, one that honored my father's values and our company's collective ambition. I thanked the employees, recognizing the unexpected turn of events, but emphasizing my dedication to the company, a passion inherited from my father. I asked for their ongoing support, and their warm applause strengthened my determination. I then emphasized the importance of every team member, stating, "Anyone who disregards this isn't fit for a leadership role," hinting that even a president could be held accountable. Jack was taken aback by my words. "What do you mean? I'm your brother, and you're saying you'd fire me if I were president?" Jack protested, confused by my prioritization of competence over family ties. He looked for support, but the employees' cool responses indicated their agreement with my viewpoint. Feeling isolated, Jack and Nora swiftly left the scene. After the incident, Jack found himself without a job, relying on the modest inheritance he had received, which quickly dwindled. "Can you lend me some money, Stella?" he later asked. However, faced with his ongoing lack of effort to find work, I was put off by his dependency. I advised our mother against offering financial assistance, pointing out his fall from grace and the loss of his once supportive friends. Nora, who had envisioned a life of luxury as the company president's wife, also received little sympathy from her social circle after these events. Eventually, financial strain led them to sell their mansion, a temporary solution that briefly restored their extravagant lifestyle but proved unsustainable in the long run. Their savings dried up, and when they finally considered getting jobs, their lack of experience and their tarnished reputation made them unemployable. These events highlighted the consequences of entitlement and the importance of hard work, humility, and maintaining good relationships. In the ups and downs of life, Jack found himself in a new role far from his previous aspirations. He secured a part-time job at a convenience store, a significant change from his earlier plans. This job, unfamiliar and challenging, placed him alongside younger colleagues who often noticed his lack of experience. It was a humbling experience, forcing Jack to confront the realities he had previously overlooked. Nora also experienced a significant shift in her daily life. Her days as a full-time housewife, once filled with leisure and luxury, were replaced by the demands of part-time work. She took on a role as a cashier in a supermarket, working long hours for modest pay. This new chapter for Nora was marked by hard work and perseverance, a departure from her previous expectations. As my brother and sister-in-law adjusted to their new circumstances, I utilized the knowledge and insights gained from my behind-the-scenes work in the company. With the guidance of Leo and our dedicated team, we concentrated on expanding the business, drawing strength from the challenges we encountered. The ordeal with my brother not only tested our determination but also strengthened our unity. Together, we strive to honor my father's legacy by growing the company and fostering a sense of community and achievement among our employees. This contrast in our paths highlighted life's unpredictability and emphasized the importance of adaptability, humility, and hard work. While Jack and Nora adapted to their new realities, their journey served as a reminder of the lessons learned from overcoming adversity. As for me, I remained committed to leading our family business forward, treasuring the wisdom of the past while building a brighter future for everyone involved, fulfilling a promise to honor our father's memory.
I'm Sarah, and if you had told me that falling in love would lead me straight into a battlefield, I might have stayed single. But here we are, or rather, here I was, fresh into medical school, with dreams bigger than my budget. I had been studying at the college for a couple of years, living off ramen and coffee, and picking up night shifts at the local hospital to keep the lights on. Then, at a typical blowout student party, filled with too loud music and cheap beer, I met Tom. Tom was something else, polite, a bit too clean-cut for these parties, and always with a clever comment. He was studying law, and not just anywhere, but at one of those schools where his classmates were more likely to end up on TV than not. "Hey, I haven't seen you around before," I said, making my way through the crowd to where he was standing by the makeshift bar. He looked up, a bit surprised, then shot me a smile. Just hiding from the chaos. "Tom," he extended his hand, which I shook, feeling the firmness of his grip. "Sarah," I replied. "Med student by day, coffee zombie by night." He laughed. "Sounds intense. Law's a snooze fest compared to that." We hit it off instantly. Within weeks, Tom and I were a thing, and I was happy. I mean, really happy. Then came the day he wanted me to meet his folks. I should have seen the storm coming. His parents lived in one of those massive houses where you could play hide and seek and actually need to call for help to find each other. I remember standing at their door, decked out in the nicest dress I owned, which suddenly felt too plain. Tom's mom, Mrs. Waverly, opened the door, and her eyes did a quick scan from my head to my toes. The chill in her hello could have frosted a cake. "Mom, this is Sarah." "Sarah, my mother," Tom introduced us, unaware of the ice in the air. Mrs. Waverly forced a smile. "Pleasure. Come in." Dinner was like sitting in a court where I was both the accused and the only witness. The table was set like something out of a magazine, with more forks and knives than I knew what to do with. "So, Sarah, Tom tells us you're in medical school. That must be interesting," Mr. Waverly said, in a tone that suggested he found it anything but. "It is, sir. Every day's a new challenge," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Mrs. Waverly joined in, her words sharp and quick. "And you work as well? A nurse, was it?" "Yes, at the city hospital. It's a good experience," I said, feeling my face heat up. She smirked. "Oh, a nurse. Well, we always need someone to clean up, don't we?" Mr. Waverly, meanwhile, had excused himself, mentioning something about needing to check on some work in his study. A convenient escape. The rest of the evening didn't improve. Mrs. Waverly's comments ranged from my family background, "So, your parents do, what exactly?" to my attire, "That dress is interesting. Where did you get it?" Each word was a barb, each glance a judgment. I wanted to defend myself, to tell her that I was more than my job, more than my clothes, more than the sum of my bank account. But I bit my tongue, for Tom's sake. As we drove home, the coldness of that night settled deep in my bones. I turned to Tom, trying to lighten the mood. "How about we just elope?" I half-joked, imagining a small, quiet wedding, just the two of us. Tom didn't laugh. He looked at me, dead serious. "Sarah, I want the big day, gala, guests, the whole 9 yards. We just gotta warm up to my parents a bit more, especially you." His words felt like a bucket of ice water. I nodded, hiding my disappointment. "Okay, we'll try it your way," I said, though my stomach nodded at the thought. Not a week later, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Waverly. "Sarah, darling, could you pop over this afternoon? I need a bit of help around the house." Her voice was sweet, which should have been my first warning. Something about her tone didn't sit right, but I agreed. I baked some cupcakes, chocolate, everyone's favorite, or so I thought, and dressed in my prettiest casual dress, hoping to make a better impression. When I arrived, the house loomed large and unfriendly, just like my memories of it. Mrs. Waverly met me at the door, not with a smile, but with a mop and a bucket. "Oh good, you're here. The housekeeper's sick, and we're in a dreadful state. You don't mind helping out, do you?" I stood there, cupcakes in hand, now holding a mop. No, of course not," I stammered, more out of shock than willingness. "Great. Start in the kitchen. And you can just leave those." She nodded disdainfully at my cupcakes. "In the trash. I don't eat that." My cheeks burned, but I swallowed the hurt. I wasn't going to let her see me upset. I moved to the kitchen and started scrubbing. The house was massive, and cleaning it felt like an endless task. As I worked, I could hear laughter from the pool area where Mrs. Waverly and her friends lounged. Hours later, hands raw and back aching, I called out, "Mrs. Waverly, I've finished. Is there anything else?" She sauntered in, inspecting my work with a hawk's eye, searching for any speck of dust to criticize. Finally, she had to concede. "Well, it does look spotless. You do know your way around a mop, Sarah. How about twice a week then?" I stared at her, mouth agape. I have my studies, night shifts at the hospital, and my thesis." Mrs. Waverly's face hardened. "Listen, dear, if you want to be part of this family, these are the hoops you jump through. Tom's waiting for us to get along. Don't disappoint him, or me." The threat was clear. Marry Tom, clean the house. Don't, and well, the alternative wasn't an option. "Okay," I muttered, defeated. Twice a week, I came, I cleaned, and each time, Mrs. Waverly found new ways to remind me of where I came from and where she thought I belonged. Twice a week, like clockwork, I scrubbed and cleaned Tom's family mansion. It wasn't what I signed up for when I imagined a life with him, but Mrs. Waverly seemed to have decided my role long before I even had a say. "You look just right with a mop, Sarah. It suits you better than a stethoscope ever will," she would taunt as she watched me from her perch, sipping her expensive tea. Nobody knew about this arrangement, not Tom, not his dad. Just me and Mrs. Waverly in this twisted secret of servitude. She never paid me. Instead, she paid with sharp jabs about my background, about how I was practically a charity case they had taken in. The year wore on, and between the cleaning, my intern shifts at the hospital, and my studies, my graduation project nearly suffered. But I powered through, fueled by the dream of the day I could finally call myself a doctor. Amid all this, wedding plans buzzed in the background. Mrs. Waverly took the reins, dictating everything from the napkin folds to the guest list. "We need to teach you how to not embarrass us," she declared one afternoon, enrolling me in an etiquette school. "You can't go around looking like a hillbilly at your own wedding." The etiquette classes were a whole new level of humiliation. The instructor, a stern woman named Mrs. Penrose, had no patience for my lack of sophistication. No, no, no. It's left hand on the lap, right hand for the fork. Have you never dined anywhere that didn't have plastic cutlery? She chided during one of our sessions. I'm trying my best, I muttered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks as I fumbled with the silverware again. Mrs. Penrose sighed, a sound of weary frustration. Your best needs to get a lot better. This is basic, my dear. As if the etiquette lessons weren't enough, Mrs. Waverley's next project was dance lessons, and then, French lessons. You'll sing a lovely French song at the wedding, she announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I can't even sing in English, Mrs. Waverley. And I really don't have time to learn French, I protested, but my words fell on deaf ears. When I brought up these absurd demands to Tom, hoping for some support, he only tightened his lips and repeated the family mantra. My mom's just looking out for us. You know how important this is. Just stick with it, okay? I felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. It wasn't just the cleaning or the classes, it was his inability to see how much I was struggling just to fit into this image his mother had crafted for me. I remember walking into the dance studio, my body aching from a 12-hour shift at the hospital, and meeting my dance instructor, a lively man named Marco who seemed to dance rather than walk. Light on your feet, eh? Let's see what you've got. Marco chuckled, putting on some classical music. I tried to follow along, but my movements were clumsy, my mind too full of medical terminologies and French vocab I had crammed the night before. Whoa, whoa, it's dancing, not wrestling. Marco laughed, stopping the music. Relax, you're too stiff. Imagine you're floating. Floating's hard when you feel like sinking, I admitted, half laughing at my own sad joke. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of the world seemed to press down on me. Etiquette, dancing, French, cleaning, each demand piling on top of the last until I felt I could barely breathe. The wedding was fast approaching, and the tension was as thick as the fancy curtains in Tom's family living room. Mrs. Waverley, always plotting, decided a bachelorette party was in order, a final hurrah before the big day, she said. I arrived at their house, dressed casually but elegantly, hoping to at least enjoy an evening without tasks or lessons. Mrs. Waverley greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sarah, darling, so glad you could make it. Here, you must try some of this champagne, it's from Tom's father's collection. I hesitated. Oh, I don't really drink, I murmured, trying not to make a scene. Nonsense. She laughed, handing me a flute filled with bubbly liquid. It's a celebration. Just one glass won't hurt. The room was filled with her friends, all elegantly dressed, their eyes sharp and calculating like birds of prey. Feeling the pressure, I took a small sip to appease her, intending to set the glass down and forget it. But the room started spinning soon after, and everything became a blur. I woke up suddenly to the harsh sensation of cold water splashing on my face. Mrs. Waverley stood over me, her expression twisted with fake concern that quickly shifted to scorn. Look at you. Drunk and passed out. How disgraceful. I blinked, trying to orient myself. The room was still spinning, and I could hear murmurs and snickers around me. My eyes found Tom and his father, both staring down at a phone. Mr. Waverley's voice boomed. This is outrageous. I knew she wasn't right for our family. What's going on? I managed to stammer, my voice hoarse, my mind racing to piece together the situation. Mr. Waverley, face red with anger, thrust the phone at me. The screen showed pictures of me, but not just any pictures. In them, I was sprawled on the couch, my clothing disheveled to reveal my underwear, a bottle of alcohol carelessly placed in my limp hand, and a cigarette dangling from my lips. My eyes were closed, head lolling in a way that screamed of a setup. I felt my heart sink. I didn't do this, I whispered, looking up at them, my plea clear in my eyes. Tom looked from the phone to me, his expression torn. Mrs. Waverley cut in, her voice sharp. Oh please, look at yourself. Do you expect us to believe you're innocent? This is who you really are, Sarah. No, you've got to listen to me, I started, my voice gaining strength as I found my footing, despite the dizziness. I didn't drink that much. Just one glass, and I didn't even want it. Something was in that drink. You did this. Mrs. Waverly feigned shock, her hand at her chest. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? After all we've done for you, this is how you repay our kindness? The room was thick with tension, the air almost suffocating as accusations flew. Standing there, soaked and humiliated, I knew I had to take control of the situation. I'm going to the hospital, I declared, my voice steady, despite the chaos. I'll donate blood for tests. If they find anything, any drug that shouldn't be there, I'm reporting this to the police. Mrs. Waverly's face drained of color, her usual composure slipping as the gravity of my words hit her. She glanced around, her eyes darting between the shocked faces of her guests and her family. It was just a sleeping pill, she blurted out, the words spilling from her lips in a panicked rush. I just wanted to lighten up the party. I didn't mean any harm. Tom's face was a mix of anger and disbelief. Mom, how could you? He turned to me, his eyes softening. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Please, let's not involve the police. Think about the family's reputation. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the desperation in his eyes. It was always about the family's reputation, wasn't it? Never about what was right. I won't go to the police, I said slowly, but on one condition. What is it? Tom asked, relief flickering in his eyes. I'm not your family's cleaner. Not anymore. And I'm certainly not working for free. The silence that followed was heavy. Tom and Mr. Waverly exchanged looks of shock, clearly unaware of what I had been put through. Mrs. Waverly attempted to smile, her usual charm seeping through her facade. Let's not dwell on past misunderstandings. We were all preparing for the wedding, after all. I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. It's not a misunderstanding. For the past year, your wife has had me cleaning your house under the pretense that it was just helping out. I was never paid, and all the while, she pocketed the money meant for the cleaner. Mr. Waverly turned to his wife, his voice low and dangerous. Is this true, Helen? She hesitated, then nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. I thought it would be a good test of her character, she muttered. Test of her character? I echoed, incredulous. Is that what you call exploitation? Mr. Waverly's face was a mask of anger and embarrassment. He looked from his wife to me, the pieces falling into place. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I had no idea. Tom took my hand, his touch gentle. The wedding is still on if you want it. I'm sorry for all of this. Really sorry. I nodded, accepting his apology, but feeling the weight of his mother's gaze on me. As the room began to clear, Mrs. Waverly leaned in, her whisper harsh against my ear. I'll find a way to separate you two. This isn't over. On the day of my wedding, draped in a gown that made me feel like a princess out of a fairy tale, I was floating on air. Yet, every so often, Mrs. Waverly's thinly veiled threats echoed in my mind, casting long shadows over my joy. As we stood at the altar, Mrs. Waverly approached, her steps measured, her smile too sweet. Sarah, dear, it's time for your surprise. Remember? You promised to delight us with a little French song. Her voice was light, but her eyes glittered with mischief. I froze, the words hitting me like ice water. I'm not ready to sing, especially not in French, I whispered, turning towards Tom with a desperate look. Tom, caught in the middle of his mother's schemes and his own desire to keep the peace, seemed conflicted. He gave me a tight smile. Come on, Sarah, it's just a song. Let's not upset anyone. Do it for the family, for the guests. Reluctantly, I walked over to the DJ booth, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the murmur of the crowd. The DJ, a young guy with sympathetic eyes, leaned in as I approached. Your mother-in-law insisted on non-Jene regret rain. Tough song, even for the pros. My stomach nodded. She had set me up to fail, to humiliate me in front of everyone we cared about. But I wasn't going to let her have this victory. Not today. I had something else in mind, something she wouldn't see coming. As I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, Mrs. Waverly clapped her hands, drawing the attention of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's give Sarah our full attention. She's been practicing so hard." Her voice was saccharine sweet, laced with venom. "Remember, no laughing too loudly." The crowd turned to me, expectant faces all around. I could feel their curiosity, their anticipation. Some were puzzled, wondering since when had I developed a talent for singing, let alone in French. As the music started, I held the microphone with a shaky hand, knowing that I wasn't about to sing. Instead, I had orchestrated a reveal that would expose the true colors of the woman who had tried to undermine me at every turn. "Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the screen. I have something important to show you all," I announced, my voice echoing through the hall. The room hushed, the playful notes of the French song dying away as the projector flickered to life. Instead of the romantic vistas of France, the screen displayed a series of images and videos that captured Mrs. Waverly in intimate moments with the young pool cleaner. The gasps and murmurs swelled into a loud buzz as each new image made her deception clearer. Mrs. Waverly's face turned a deep shade of red, then white as she realized the extent of her exposure. She spun towards me, fury contorting her features. "You wretch! How dare you invade my privacy like this?" she shrieked, her composure breaking like thin ice underfoot. Tom was staring at the screen, his expression one of disbelief. When he finally spoke, his words were like daggers. "You've destroyed my family's reputation with your spite. You're just an ungrateful beggar. You should have appreciated what we were offering you." My heart felt heavy, but my resolve did not waver. "Tom," I replied, my voice clear and unwavering, "you can't destroy what never existed. Your family's reputation was a lie." With that, I took off my wedding veil, placed the microphone back on its stand, and picked up my bouquet from the table. I walked up to Tom, and with everyone watching, I threw the bouquet at his feet. I could never marry a man who refuses to stand by me, who can't see the truth for what it is. The room was in chaos, whispers turning into shouts as the implications of the scandal began to sink in. Mr. Waverly turned to his wife, his voice laced with disgust. "How could you do this to us? To our family?" Meanwhile, Mrs. Waverly, now completely unhinged, tried to salvage her dignity, but it was too late. The damage was done. "This is not the end, Sarah. I won't let it end like this," she hissed, her eyes darting around the room, looking for any ally in her downfall. But there were none. The guests were a mix of shocked and appalled, their faces reflecting a range of emotions from pity to disdain. The image of a united, respectable family had shattered, replaced by the reality of deceit and betrayal. As I walked out of the church, the weight of the dress felt lighter with each step, the cool air kissing my face with promises of new beginnings. Behind me, the sounds of a family unraveling filled the air, a poignant reminder of the bullet I had dodged. The aftermath was indeed tremendous. Mr. Waverly filed for divorce, and Mrs. Waverly found herself ostracized from the community she had once reigned over. Their family's business suffered as partners pulled out, unwilling to associate with scandal. Tom was left to deal with the fallout, his once unshakable belief in his family's integrity shattered. Years had passed since that fateful day at the altar, and I had since become a practicing surgeon, my days filled with long shifts and life-saving decisions. I had built a new life, one that was mine alone, shaped by my choices, not by deceit or manipulation. It was a typical day at the hospital when she came in, a patient, frail and barely recognizable, cloaked in tattered clothes, a stark contrast to the affluent attire I had once known her in. It took me a moment, but then the recognition hit. It was Mrs. Waverly, the mother of my ex-fiancé. She was wheeled into the emergency room, her face etched with lines of hardship and time, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and desperation. As the attending surgeon, it was my job to assess her condition. She needed surgery, urgently, but a quick check revealed she had no insurance, a fact that added yet another layer of complexity to the situation. "Dr. Sarah Thompson," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper as she recognized me. It was the first time she had addressed me without a sneer, and the irony of the moment wasn't lost on me. I need help. Tom, he's turned me away. I have nowhere else to go." "Mrs. Waverly," I started, keeping my voice professional, devoid of the emotions churning inside me. "You need surgery. But without insurance, it's complicated." She clasped her hands together, the once flashy rings she wore now absent, her fingers trembling. "Please, could you pay for it? Or at least do it for free? I'm begging you." Her plea was pathetic, a far cry from the commanding tone she once wielded like a weapon. I took a deep breath, the weight of her request heavy on my shoulders. This was more than just a medical decision, it was a moral crossroads. "Mrs. Waverly," I said slowly, each word deliberate. "I'm a surgeon, not a charity. You treated me horribly, manipulated your son against me, tried to ruin my life. You're not my responsibility. But I have nothing left," she countered weakly, the fight seemingly gone from her voice. "And whose fault is that?" I replied, my tone colder than I intended. "You made your choices, Mrs. Waverly. You chose to deceive, to scorn, to alienate. Now, you live with those choices." She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly as if seeing me for the first time. Not the young woman she could bully, but the doctor I had become, hardened by years of saving lives and surviving the cuts of both scalpel and scorn. "I will ensure you get the minimal care required by law," I continued, turning away to hide the conflict inside me. "But I won't pay for your surgery. I won't bend the rules for you. You need to make arrangements, or the state will." Leaving her in the care of the nursing staff, I walked out of the room, her soft sobs fading behind me. It was a harsh stance, perhaps, but life had taught me that mercy was a luxury sometimes, especially for those who had never shown any themselves. Growing up, I always felt like the backdrop in a two-person play, starring my sister, Lily, as the cherished lead. Our parents never tried to hide their preference for her. It was like living in a house where I was the guest, and Lily was the princess. From as early as I can remember, Lily got everything, the best dresses, the new toys, and most importantly, their attention. I got hand-me-downs, stuff from bargain bins, and the occasional nod that yes, I existed too. One evening, I was about 10, I remember sitting at the dinner table. Dad was going on about Lily's school project. "Look at this castle Lily made. Isn't it something?" Dad said, his eyes lighting up like Christmas trees as he held up a glitter-covered cardboard castle. Mom nodded, beaming at Lily. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. You're so talented." I had made a volcano that actually erupted, but it was sitting on the other end of the table, unnoticed. "Mine erupts," I muttered, but no one paid attention. Lily, with her bright green eyes sparkling, leaned over and whispered loud enough for only me to hear. "It's just baking soda and vinegar. Not a big deal." I clenched my fists under the table, feeling my face heat up. But I stayed quiet. Arguing with Lily only made things worse, because somehow, I always ended up being the bad guy. Grandma was the only one who saw through it all. She lived with us, thank God, and she was my one ally. One day, after a particularly nasty episode where Lily had blamed me for breaking a vase I hadn't even touched, Grandma pulled me aside. "You know, Anna, your parents might not see everything, but I do. You're just as special, never doubt that," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "I wish they could see that too," I replied, looking down at my scuffed shoes. Grandma hugged me tightly. "I've told your dad time and again. Children should be loved equally." But it never changed. As we grew up, Lily turned into a master of manipulation. She had our parents wrapped around her finger, and anything she did wrong somehow got pinned on me. One day, I overheard her talking on the phone with a friend. "Anna is such a loser. She thinks Mom and Dad actually care about her. It's hilarious. I stormed into her room, furious. Why do you have to be like this, Lily? What have I ever done to you? She just smirked, her red hair like a halo of fire around her wicked grin. Oh, Anna, don't be such a drama queen. Everyone knows I'm the good one here. I wanted to yell, to scream that she wasn't, that she was lying and cruel. But I knew better. It would just end in tears, mine. Instead, I walked away, my heart pounding, knowing I had to get out of this house as soon as I could. When high school ended, and I got into college, I was ready to leave and never look back. But my parents refused to pay for my tuition. They said it was because I wasn't serious enough about my future. Luckily, Grandma stepped in. She paid my fees, telling me to use this chance to build a life for myself, away from the shadow of my sister. College was like stepping into another world, one where no one knew about Lily or how I was always the second choice in my family. It felt like I could finally breathe, like I was shedding an old skin that never really fit me in the first place. The first person I met on campus was Carla, my roommate. She was from another state and didn't know a thing about me, which was refreshing. Carla had this straightforward way of talking that I wasn't used to back home. Hey, I'm Carla. You're Anna, right? Let's make this room cool, okay? She said as soon as I walked into our tiny dorm room, her words direct and devoid of any pretense. Sure, sounds good to me, I replied, grateful for her easy demeanor. In those first few weeks, Carla showed me around, introducing me to her friends and pulling me into her social circle. I was hesitant at first, unsure how to act when no one expected me to fail or fade into the background. Hanging out with Carla and her friends, I realized they spoke their minds, no filters, no walking on eggshells. It was all straightforward and, honestly, kind of liberating. Anna, you gotta loosen up. We're all here to have a good time, not judge each other. Carla said one night as we sat in the common room, surrounded by laughter and the smell of microwave popcorn. I know, I'm just not used to this, I admitted, feeling a bit out of place, but welcome at the same time. Well, get used to it. You're with us now, she said with a wink. As the semester went on, I started joining study groups, attending class regularly, and really throwing myself into my marketing courses. My professors noticed. Miss Grant, your project was impressive. You have a knack for this, Professor Jacobs commented one day after class, handing back a paper I'd written with a high grade on it. Thank you, Professor. I really enjoyed working on it, I said, feeling a pride I hadn't known before. At the end of my first year, I got a summer internship at a local marketing firm. I was over the moon. I called Grandma to tell her the news. That's wonderful, Anna. I knew you could do it. Grandma's voice crackled over the phone, filled with genuine pride. Thanks, Grandma. I couldn't have done it without your help, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. And you'll do even more. Just watch, she said, her confidence in me unshakable. By the time senior year rolled around, I was a different person. I had confidence, real friends, and a career path that excited me. College gave me the freedom to be who I wanted to be, away from the shadow of my family's expectations and Lily's manipulative antics. After graduation, I landed a job at a well-known cosmetology company in the city. But it wasn't just my career that was about to change, my personal life was on the brink of something entirely new. It all started at a city exhibition where different companies showcased their products. I was in charge of our company's booth, explaining the benefits of our latest skincare line to anyone who showed interest. Looks like you really know your stuff, a voice said from behind me. I turned around to see a tall guy with an easy smile watching me. Thanks. I try, I responded, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. I'm Michael, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Anna, I replied, shaking his hand. There was an immediate, undeniable spark. We chatted casually at first about the products and the exhibition. But then, the conversation shifted. Michael was funny, throwing jokes left and right, making me laugh more than I had in a long while. And so, half-jokingly, we set up a date for the following weekend. Dinner turned into seeing each other almost every weekend after that. Michael was different. He listened when I talked, really listened. He cared about what I thought and felt, which was a new and wonderful experience for me. The months flew by, filled with little moments and big feelings. Before I knew it, a year had passed, and we were seriously discussing our future together. One night, over a quiet dinner at our favorite little Italian place, Michael looked more serious than usual. He took a deep breath. "Anna, how would you feel about making this official? Like, really official?" I knew what he meant, but I needed to hear him say it. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" I prompted him. Michael nodded, taking my hands in his. "Marry me, Anna. Let's start our own story." Tears sprang to my eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound happiness that flooded through me. "Yes, Michael, I'll marry you." Getting engaged to Michael was like a dream. I was over the moon, floating through my days with a goofy grin plastered on my face. But when it came to actually planning the wedding, reality hit hard and fast, especially when my family got involved. I remember calling my parents to tell them the news. Their response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," Mom said, her voice strained. "But are you sure about this? You know how these things can be rushed." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my cool. "Yes, Mom, I'm sure. Michael is great, and we're really happy together." "Well, if you say so," she sighed, and then quickly changed the subject. The trouble really started when I went home to discuss the wedding plans. The air was thick with tension the minute I stepped into the house. Dad was the first to bring up the elephant in the room. "You know, Lily should really help with the wedding. She has such good taste," Dad suggested, casting a meaningful glance at Mom. Lily, who'd been surprisingly quiet, suddenly lit up. "Oh, absolutely. I'd love to help plan your wedding, Anna." I was suspicious. Lily and helping didn't usually go in the same sentence unless it benefited her directly. But before I could decline, Mom chimed in. "It would be such a nice way to bond before the big day. And think about it, Anna, with your work schedule, do you really have the time to manage everything?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. I was too busy, and maybe, just maybe, Lily had changed. How wrong I was. Weeks went by, and every time I called Lily to check on the progress, she reassured me with her sweetest voice. "Everything's under control, sis. I booked the venue, and wait till you see the decorations I planned." 2 weeks before the wedding, I took a day off to see everything for myself. The venue was booked, all right, but that was about it. No caterer, no decorator, no nothing. It was a disaster waiting to happen. I called Lily, my voice shaking with anger. "What the hell, Lily? You said everything was taken care of." "Oh, calm down, Anna. You're always so dramatic. It's all going to be fine." She brushed me off. "Fine? There's nothing done. Were you planning to ruin my wedding?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, in a voice dripping with feigned innocence, she said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Everything will be ready, trust me." I hung up, fuming. No way I was going to let her mess this up. I called my friend Janet, who had an impressive experience with event planning. "Janet, I'm in a bind. Can you help me salvage my wedding?" "Of course, Anna. Don't worry, we'll make sure your day is perfect. What's done is done. Let's fix this," Janet responded, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. With Janet's help, we started from scratch. It was a mad dash of booking, tasting, and organizing, but slowly things started coming together. The day before the wedding, I confronted Lily again. This time in person. She just shrugged. "Look, I did what I could. If that's not enough for you, then maybe you're expecting too much," Lily said, her voice cool and detached. I expected my sister to have my back. Clearly, I was wrong. I replied, my voice steady, despite the anger boiling inside. Despite all the setbacks, the wedding day arrived, and it was everything I had hoped for and more. The venue looked beautiful, the food was delicious, and the music set the perfect mood. As I danced with Michael, feeling like the luckiest woman in the world, I almost forgot about the chaos Lily had tried to cause. Almost. But as the evening wore on, the inevitable couldn't be avoided. It was time for the speeches, and my heart sank as Lily stepped up to the microphone, her smile a little too sweet. "Hello, everyone." Lily's voice was bright, carrying over the crowd. "I just want to say how happy I am for Anna and Michael. Being the maid of honor and the wedding planner was such an honor." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. The lies were too much. She was taking credit for everything Janet and I had scrambled to fix. My hands clenched into fists under the table, but Michael squeezed my hand, giving me a look that said, "Let it go." But then Mom took the microphone from Lily, her eyes glistening with pride, for Lily, not for me. "And we need to thank Lily for saving the day. We are so proud of how you stepped up. Anna, you should be grateful to have such a wonderful sister." That was it. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Actually," I started, my voice loud enough to draw every eye in the room to me. I stood, my chair scraping back sharply. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." The room went silent, all chatter stopping as everyone waited for what I would say next. "Lily didn't plan this," I said, my voice steady, despite the shaking in my legs. 2 weeks before today, I found out nothing was prepared. No flowers, no caterer, not even a cake. If it wasn't for my friend Janet, who is here tonight, this day would have been a disaster. Lily stood up, her chair clattering behind her. "That's not true. I did so much for this wedding. Anna, why are you always trying to make me look bad? Why? You wanted this day to fail," I said, turning to face him, then the crowd. "I have the emails from the vendors, messages saying they hadn't heard from anyone until I contacted them." Lily's expression faltered, then burst into tears, running from the room. The dramatic exit, another classic move. The rest of the evening was a blur. Some guests whispered and shot me sympathetic looks, while others seemed to buy into Lily's tearful act. It hurt, but at least now, some people knew the truth. As the party wound down, Michael held me close, whispering, "We're married now. That's all that matters." He was right. Despite the drama, we were together, and that was the most important thing. But as we left the venue, I couldn't help but feel the sting of my family's doubts, and Lily's treachery lingering in the air. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. My sister Lily disappeared, leaving behind nothing but her car, her purse, and a damning note that pointed the finger straight at me. The note was a masterstroke in her ongoing drama, claiming my supposed cruelty drove her to think about ending her life. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My parents, already cool towards me thanks to Lily's theatrics at the wedding, now turned ice cold. The phone call from my mom about Lily's disappearance is etched into my mind, her voice cold and accusing. "Anna, your sister is gone. She left a note, and she blames you. She said you've been cruel, that you pushed her to this," Mom said, each word like a dagger. "That's ridiculous. I haven't done anything to her. You know how she is, how she twists things," I shot back, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and despair. "Enough, Anna. Your sister is missing, possibly worse, and all you can think about is defending yourself," she snapped before hanging up. The accusations didn't stop there. Relatives, friends, even neighbors seemed to have read the script Lily left behind, all casting me as the villain in her twisted story. But the worst blow came from Grandma, the one person I thought I could always count on. When I went to see her, hoping for some support, she met me with a frosty gaze, her disappointment palpable. "Anna, I can't believe you. Your sister felt so tormented she had to run away. And all you can say is that it's a lie?" Grandma's voice was stern, her usual warm tone gone. "Grandma, please, you know me. I would never hurt Lily," I pleaded, feeling the tears start to well up. Grandma shook her head, her expression hardening. "I thought I knew you. But Lily's note. Anna, she was clearly in a lot of pain. And no truth you wanted to prove is worth her life. But it's not the truth. I protested, my voice rising in desperation. I think it's best if you leave. I need to think about all this, about where we all went wrong, she said, turning away from me, signaling the conversation was over. Walking away from Grandma's house that day felt like leaving my last safe haven. Betrayed and isolated, the weight of the entire situation bore down on me, crushing. As the days turned into weeks, with no word from Lily, the strain started to show in every aspect of my life. Michael tried to be supportive, but the constant stress was a wedge between us. Anna, maybe it's time to just let it go. Maybe stop trying to defend yourself and just move on, Michael suggested one evening, his voice weary. How can I move on? My own family thinks I'm a monster. How do we just live with that? I snapped, frustration boiling over. I felt utterly alone, surrounded by people who either believed the worst about me or didn't know how to help. And with Lily gone, the narrative she crafted seemed to solidify into an undeniable truth in the eyes of everyone around me. With each passing day adding weight to the loneliness I felt. Michael, the one person I believed would always be by my side, had grown distant. His frequent business trips to another city only widened the chasm between us. It wasn't just emotional distance, something tangible had shifted, and the receipt I found one afternoon was the grim proof. Stuffed carelessly between the pages of a magazine on our coffee table was a receipt for women's clothing, expensive clothing, the kind you buy when you want to impress someone. The kind you don't buy for your wife and then forget to mention. At first, denial took over. There must be some explanation, a surprise maybe? But the cold, hard doubt crept in, gnawing at me. After everything with Lily and the family, this felt like another bitter betrayal. I needed answers. I hired a private detective. It felt so cliché, like something out of a bad movie, but what other options did I have? I gave him all the details, Michael's travel schedule, the receipt, everything. He called a couple of weeks later. I have the results of the investigation, he said, his voice neutral. I'll drop off the full report and the photos tomorrow. It's best if you see everything for yourself. The next day, armed with the report and a sealed envelope of photos, I felt like I was on the verge of a breakdown. But there was one thing I needed to do before confronting Michael. I needed to talk to Grandma. Grandma looked frail, her illness having taken a visible toll on her. But when she saw me, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, confusion, maybe a hint of relief. Anna, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice weaker than I remembered. I needed to see you, I said, stepping inside, feeling the weight of the envelope in my hand. We sat in her living room, the air thick with unsaid words. I handed her the envelope, watching her hands tremble slightly as she opened it and pulled out the photos. I watched her face as she looked at each photo, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to sadness. Then she looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Oh, Anna. I had no idea, she whispered, the realization dawning on her. Grandma, I know things have been awful between us. I know you felt I pushed Lily away, but these show a different story, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She reached out, her hand gripping mine tightly. I was wrong, Anna. I'm so sorry. Your sister, she deceived me too, not just you. Grandma passed away quietly 2 weeks after our last conversation, and we gathered at her house for her will reading. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and faint floral perfume, a smell that always reminded me of Grandma. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, steeling myself for what was to come. Then the door swung open dramatically, and there she was, Lily, her red hair just as fiery as I remembered, her smirk as smug as ever. The room erupted. My parents burst into tears, rushing to embrace her, cries of joy mingling with sighs of relief. Everyone was shocked, everyone except me. Lily didn't waste a moment, striding over to Michael with that confident swagger, planting a kiss on his lips like she owned him. The gasps that followed were audible, the shock palpable. She turned to face me, that smirk still playing on her lips. "I planned it all, Anna," she said, her voice loud and clear for everyone to hear. "I made sure Grandma would turn against you, thinking she'd leave everything to me. Pretty clever, huh?" The room froze, all eyes on us. Michael moved to sit next to Lily, their hands finding each other like pieces of a sinister puzzle falling into place. I felt the eyes on me, waiting for a breakdown, a scream, tears, anything. But I was done with the theatrics. I met Lily's gaze with a calm I barely felt. "Are you done?" I asked, my voice even. Her smile faltered, not expecting my composure. The notary cleared his throat, ready to read Grandma's will. You could hear a pin drop as he unfolded the papers, his voice solemn. "I, Eleanor Thompson, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath all my property and assets to..." There was a pause, a cruel stretch of silence, before he continued. "Anna Grant." Lily's face, Michael's face, it was a picture. The shock, the disbelief, the betrayal. It was all there, raw and unfiltered. Michael looked at me, then at Lily, his expression one of a man defeated. "I knew about everything," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "I knew you were hiding in the city Michael frequently visited for his business trips. I knew about the affair." I pulled out the photos and evidence the detective had gathered and tossed them on the table. The room erupted into chaos, voices raised in shock, anger, disbelief. My parents, still clinging to their golden child, looked at me with eyes full of questions and accusations. Lily and Michael started blubbering, apologies and excuses spilling out. "Anna, please, we didn't mean..." "Save it," I cut them off, my heart hardening against their fake pleas. "I'm filing for divorce, and I want compensation for the betrayal." My statement was met with stunned silence, then more whispers. Lily tried to reach out, tears streaming down her face, but I was done. "You made your choice," I told her coldly. After the meeting, as the room cleared, I stayed back, letting the reality of everything wash over me. The money, the property, it meant nothing compared to the betrayal. I signed the necessary papers, my signature steady, my resolve clear. Life moved on. I settled the divorce, received the compensation, and started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. It was hard, harder than anything I'd ever done. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own story. Life in advertising is a lot like balancing on a high wire. Every step has to be measured, or you're likely to fall. That's how it felt, starting my new position at the central office. I was Ellie, freshly promoted and eager to prove myself in a game where creativity clashed with deadlines and client whims. It was my first day as a senior creative lead, and the office buzzed with the quiet intensity of a beehive. My desk was a clean slate, sprinkled with welcoming notes from some of my new team members. As I settled in, the first meeting of the day was called by Ms. Thorne, our department head, who had a reputation tough enough to sandpaper the floor. "All right, everyone, let's make this quick. We're not here to waste time," Ms. Thorne snapped as we gathered around the glass table in the meeting room. Her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. As the meeting progressed, I pitched our new campaign idea. It's fresh, it targets the younger demographic with their love for sustainability and authenticity. We're not just selling a product, we're selling a lifestyle they want to embrace. Ms. Thorne's lips thinned. "Interesting, Ellie. But let's make sure it's not too dreamy. These millennials might love a cause, but at the end of the day, it's the hard sell that closes the deal." The rest of the day was a blur of introductions, project briefings, and setting up endless passwords for various systems. When the clock finally signaled the end of the day, I was the last to leave, making sure everything was lined up for the next morning. As I stepped out into the cool evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my older sister, Amanda. She rarely texted during the week, so seeing her name light up my screen brought a smile to my face. "Hey kiddo, just wanted to send you a little cheer. Mia nailed her choir solo today, and I got it on video. Sending it your way. Miss you." I texted back a string of heart emojis and a promise to call her over the weekend. My sister and I hadn't had the easiest time growing up, especially after our mom took off with her new flavor of the month and left us with our dad. When he passed, it felt like we only had each other against the world. I watched the video of Mia, her voice crystal clear and surprisingly mature for a 12-year-old. She had that spark, something special that made her more than just another kid in a school choir. "You're going places, kid," I murmured, pocketing my phone with a renewed sense of purpose. Saturday rolled around like a promise. I was finally on my way to Amanda's, armed with Mia's favorite chocolate cupcakes. Life had tossed enough at us, but weekends like these were small patches of normalcy we clung to. I knocked on Amanda's door, the familiar creak welcoming me inside. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sound of Mia practicing scales in the background. Amanda emerged from the kitchen, a mock frown on her face. "Ellie, tell your niece to give it a rest, will ya?" My head's pounding like a drum solo. Laughing, I called out, "Mia, take 5. Aunt Ellie's here with the goods." Mia bounded into the room, her excitement bubbling over. "Aunt Ellie, did you watch the video? Did you see me hit that high note?" "I did, superstar. You were fantastic." I ruffled her hair, handing over the cupcakes, which she accepted with a grin. As Mia dashed back to her room, likely to stash the cupcakes away from adult supervision, I turned to Amanda. "How you holding up, sis? You look a bit worn out." Amanda sighed, pouring us coffee. "Work's a beast, Ellie. You know how it is. But it's nothing a good cuppa can't fix." We settled onto the couch, sipping the bitter brew. "Ellie, have you spoken to Mom recently?" Amanda's voice was tentative, almost cautious. Rolling my eyes, I shrugged. "You know I haven't. Not after the last circus." "Why? Has she reached out?" "Nah, just the usual postcard from wherever the hell she is now. Maldives, I think. Says she's living her best life or some crap like that." Amanda's tone dripped with disdain. I snorted. "Living her best life, huh? Must be nice, forgetting you have daughters who deal with real life every day." The conversation turned as we discussed Mom's latest escapades, none of which involved her being a responsible parent. It was old news, but it stung anew each time. Changing the subject, Amanda leaned in, lowering her voice even though Mia was out of earshot. "Speaking of real life, I've been thinking about setting up a YouTube channel for Mia. She's got talent, Ellie. Real talent." My interest piqued. "That's a solid idea. She's a natural in front of a camera, and Lord knows she's got the pipes." "What do you need to get started?" "Just some basic recording gear. Nothing fancy. I've saved up a bit. Plus, if it takes off, maybe it could help with her college someday." We spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming for Mia's channel, our voices filled with an excitement that had been missing for too long. It wasn't just about the potential of a YouTube channel, it was about giving Mia something solid, something joyful to hold on to. Driving back to my place, I couldn't shake the feeling of warmth that only a day well spent with loved ones could bring. Despite the chaos of work, this, family, was what mattered. And I was ready to fight for it, come what may. 2 years flew by unnoticed: work, family, and work again. That Tuesday started like any other day at the office, with coffee that was too bitter and emails that were too many. But just before lunch, my world came crashing down with a single phone call. The hospital number flashed on my screen, and a cold sweat broke out across my back as I answered. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Jenkins?" a stern voice asked on the other end. "Yes, speaking. What's wrong?" "I'm sorry to inform you that your sister, Amanda Jenkins, was brought in today. She had a heart attack at work. She didn't make it, ma'am. I'm very sorry for your loss." The floor might as well have fallen away under me. "Thank you, I'll be there as soon as I can." I hung up, my heart pounding in my ears, and my vision blurry. Stumbling to Miss Thorne's office, I barely managed to knock. Miss Thorne looked up, her usual scowl in place. What now, Jenkins? I hope you have a good reason for interrupting. My sister, she died. Heart attack. I need to go to the hospital. I managed to choke out, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Her eyes narrowed, assessing me like I was a faulty cog in her machine. Jenkins, if you need time off again this month, I can't promise your job will be waiting. I stared at her, my grief turning to anger. My sister just died. I'm going, whether my job's here or not. Without waiting for her response, I turned and left her office, her sharp voice calling after me. Think about your career, Jenkins. I didn't stop, didn't look back. Grabbing my purse, I bolted from the building and hailed a cab, the hospital address spilling from my lips like a prayer. At the hospital, I was a zombie, signing papers I didn't read, nodding to words I didn't hear. It was over. She was gone. And then the hardest part came, telling Mia. I collected her from school, the normal smile she greeted me with tearing at my heart. As we sat in the parked cab, her smile faded, her eyes searching mine. Aunt Ellie, why are you here? Where's Mom? I took a deep breath, my voice a whisper. Sweetie, something very bad happened. Mom had a big heart problem today. She didn't make it. Mia's face crumpled, her small body shaking with sobs. No, that can't be. Mommy was fine this morning. I pulled her close, her tears soaking my shirt. I know, baby, I know. I'm so sorry. We sat there, the world outside continuing as if nothing had changed, as if my sister wasn't just gone. But for us, everything had stopped. The cabbie, bless his heart, did not bother us and even turned off the meter. Later, we went back to Amanda's house, a place now hollowed by her absence. I tucked Mia into bed, the silence oppressive. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, surrounded by reminders of my sister, the weight of my new reality pressing down on me. The next morning, I had to make the call I dreaded most. My fingers were stiff as I dialed our mother's number, the phone heavy in my hand. She picked up on the third ring. Yes? Mom, it's Ellie. Amanda died yesterday. Heart attack. There was a pause, and then, oh, well, I'm on vacation. What do you expect me to do? Her words were like ice. I thought you should know. The funeral will be next week. Another pause. I see. Was there a will? Anything left behind? I clenched my teeth, anger flaring. That's all you have to say? What do you want from me, Eleanor? I have my own life. Yeah, I can see that. Don't worry about the funeral. You won't need to disrupt your precious vacation. I hung up, the phone shaking in my hand. That was it then. I was all Mia had now. And I'd be damned if I let her down like our mother had us. The funeral was last Thursday. It was as simple and quiet as Amanda herself had been. Not many people, just close friends and family, well, minus our mother, who couldn't be bothered to show up. Since then, every day has been a sprint through a maze of legal paperwork for Mia's custody and endless school runs. I've been burning the candle at both ends, trying to keep my job at the agency while being there for Mia. But today, everything caught up with me. Walking into the office, the first thing I noticed was someone else sitting at my desk. My stomach did a flip. She looked up, a faux smile plastered on her face, like she was waiting for this moment. Confused, I marched straight to Ms. Thorne's office. She was expecting me, standing by the door with that look she has, like she knows something you don't. Ellie, come in. Have a seat. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, with a too sweet tone. I didn't sit. Why is someone in my seat? My voice was more of a growl than I intended. Miss Thorne folded her hands on the desk, her eyes gleaming a bit too brightly. Ellie, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Your frequent absences have been problematic. We've made the decision to move forward with someone else in your position. My sister died, Miss Thorne. I was taking care of my niece. You knew this. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. And I am truly sorry for your loss, Ellie, but business is business. We need someone reliable. You're free to collect your things. Best of luck. I stood there, stunned, my ears ringing with her words. Without another word, I turned and left her office. Collecting my things took less than 5 minutes. The new girl at my desk didn't meet my eyes. Walking out of that building felt like leaving a part of my life behind. I hailed a cab, sinking into the seat as the city blurred past. My mind raced. What were Mia and I going to do now? How long could we last on what I had saved? Where to? The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Just drive for now, I said, pulling out my phone to check my bank app. The numbers weren't comforting. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and there were still groceries, Mia's school stuff. It piled up so fast it made my head spin. Walking through the door earlier than usual had Mia staring at me like I was a ghost. What's up, Aunt Ellie? Why are you home so early? I slumped into a chair, the weight of the day crushing down on me. Things are kind of messed up, kiddo. I lost my job today, and honestly, I'm not sure what we're going to do. Mia's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly as if to speak, but then she just turned and walked out of the room. The silence hung heavy until she came back, her arms struggling under the weight of her school backpack, which she dumped on the kitchen table. Zipper by zipper, she opened it and out spilled a mountain of dollars. My mouth dropped. Mia, where the heck did you get all this? She beamed, pride shining in her eyes. It's my money, Aunt Ellie. I earned it singing. Mom helped me set up a YouTube channel a couple of years ago. I've been posting videos of my songs. You what? I grabbed my laptop, pulling up the internet as she spelled out her channel name. The page loaded, and there it was, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, videos with views ticking into the millions, and comments piled up like treasure. Reading through the comments, I couldn't help but smile. Mia, this is incredible. You're a star. She shrugged, a bashful smile on her face. I just like singing. But I thought the money could help, especially now. I pulled her into a hug, my mind racing with possibilities. Help? Kiddo, you just saved us. But we need to manage this right. Officially, I mean. Over the next few days, I was a whirlwind of activity. I contacted an accountant friend who helped set up a trust for Mia's earnings and sorted out the tax details. I officially registered myself as her manager to keep everything professional. With the business side tightened up, I dove into the creative. We brainstormed video ideas together, planned out a schedule, and I even reached out to vocal coaches to refine her already impressive skills. Our living room turned into a makeshift studio, where Mia recorded her new songs. I learned quickly, handling the camera and editing videos late into the night. Every upload brought in more subscribers, more views, more revenue. Feeling bold, I used some of the funds to launch a targeted ad campaign on social media. We're going big, Mia, I told her as I set up the ads. Let's show everyone what you've got. Mia's next video blew up bigger than we could have imagined. It was a cover of a popular song, her voice adding a depth that the original lacked. Comments poured in, praising her unique style and emotional delivery. As her manager, I kept my eye on the business side, ensuring Mia stayed grounded and focused on her schoolwork too. We gotta keep things balanced, Mia. School's just as important. A few months later, Mia was invited to perform at a city concert, sharing the stage with local artists who were household names. Watching Mia step onto the stage, her confidence blooming under the spotlight, was a moment of pure joy. It had been a few months of smooth sailing. Mia's channel was thriving, and we were starting to see real stability. Just as I was beginning to relax, a curveball slammed into us. I got a notification that nearly knocked the wind out of me. My mother was filing for custody of Mia. I stared at the screen, disbelief coursing through me. After all these years, now she shows up? And for what? Money, obviously. It boiled my blood just thinking about it. I decided to call her, but not without hitting the record button on my phone first. I needed to capture every word. "Hello?" Her voice was as cold as I remembered. "Mom, it's Ellie. I got the notice about Mia. What are you playing at?" There was a pause, and then that all too familiar calculating tone. "Ellie, darling, let's not pretend. I know about Mia's little singing career. Seems like she's going to be quite the cash cow, huh?" I clenched my teeth, keeping my voice steady. "She's a child, Mom. And she's not a ticket to Easy Street. What do you actually want?" Her laugh chilled me. "Straight to the point, I like that. It's simple, really. You give me $300,000, and I'll walk away. If not, my lawyers will take a good hard look at how you've been exploiting her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was extortion, plain and simple. "You won't get a dime from us, Mom. And you won't get Mia either." She laughed again, that terrible sound. "We'll see about that, darling," and then she hung up. The phone call left me reeling, but also crystal clear about what I had to do. I contacted a lawyer, a good one who came highly recommended for family court battles. Sitting down in his office, I laid out everything. "She wants to take Mia away from me, claim I'm exploiting her. It's all about the money for her." I recorded our call. He listened, nodding slightly. "This is good, it's a start. We'll need more, though. Documentation of Mia's career, her schedule, how you manage her earnings. Transparency is our best defense. Everything's been above board. I've kept detailed records and receipts," I reassured him. "Good. And I'll need to talk to Mia, too. She'll likely have to testify about her living conditions and her work." The thought of Mia having to stand up in court made my stomach turn, but I nodded. "I'll prepare her. We'll do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, we pulled together everything. Mia's school records, statements from her vocal coach, video logs, financial statements. Mr. Green was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. As the court date loomed, nerves settled in like unwelcome guests. But we were ready. I had to believe that the truth would win out, that the judge would see through my mother's greed. The courtroom was colder than I remembered any place ever being, and the chill wasn't just from the air conditioning. My mother and her new husband sat across from us, looking smug. As the judge called the room to order, my stomach was in knots. My mother was called to the stand first. Her performance was something else, tears, shaky voice, the works. "I just want what's best for Mia. My daughter, Ellie, she's been forcing the child to work all hours, exploiting her for money. It's not a life for a young girl. I want to give her the stable home she deserves." Then it was our turn. My lawyer, Mr. Green, was calm and methodical. He laid out Mia's school records, showing her excellent attendance and grades. He presented logs of her work hours, well within legal limits for a child her age, and financial statements proving that the money from Mia's channel went into a trust solely for her use. "As you can see, Your Honor," Mr. Green concluded, "all allegations of exploitation are baseless. My client has gone above and beyond to ensure the well-being and proper management of her niece's talents and earnings." He then turned on the recording of the phone call I'd made to my mother. The courtroom was dead silent as her voice filled the space, her demand for money and her threats clear as day. My mother's face went white as a sheet when the recording ended. There was murmuring among the spectators. Mia then took the stand, her small voice steady and clear. "I love my Aunt Ellie. She's taken care of me, made me feel safe after Mom passed. I want to stay with her. She's my family." The judge nodded, scribbling some notes. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "Given the evidence presented, it's clear that the best interests of the child would not be served by changing her current living arrangements. The petition for custody by Mrs. Linda Jenkins is hereby denied." The gavel hit with a thud that echoed in the suddenly heavy air. My mother stormed out, her husband trailing behind her, both of their faces twisted in anger and defeat. Mia threw her arms around me, her relief palpable. "We did it, Aunt Ellie." I hugged her back, my own relief flooding through me. Yes, we did, kiddo. I told you we would. 2 years have passed since the courthouse drama, and they've been the best years of my life. Mia and we've settled into a comfortable rhythm. She's not just thriving, she's shining, singing at concerts, charming thousands on YouTube, and growing up into someone truly special. One lazy Saturday morning, while we were planning out her next video shoot, Mia looked up from her bowl of cereal with a sparkle in her eyes. "Aunt Ellie, you know, I've been thinking about college. I want to study music, really learn about it from the inside out." I smiled, handing her a glass of juice. "That's a great idea, kiddo. We've got your college fund all set up. Whatever you want to study, you can." Mia's grin widened. "Thanks, Aunt Ellie. You always make things possible." "Well, that's my job, isn't it? Keeping our dreams on track." I tousled her hair as she giggled, then the conversation shifted, as it often did these days, to more personal matters. "So, how are things with Tom?" Mia asked, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. I blushed, a smile creeping up on my face. "Actually, pretty amazing. We're getting married, Mia." Her eyes went wide. "Seriously? That's awesome. Can I be your bridesmaid?" "Of course, you goof. I wouldn't have it any other way." I chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through me at the thought of the upcoming wedding. Tom had come into my life at a time when I thought all I'd be doing was fighting fires, both at work and home. He brought a sense of peace and joy that I hadn't known I was missing. It felt right, the four of us together, Tom and his son, Mia, and me. As for my mother, word had it that her latest husband had left her after the money ran dry. I felt a pang of something that might have been pity, but Mia brought me back to reality. "You okay, Aunt Ellie?" she asked, noticing my momentary silence. I squeezed her hand, shaking off the shadows of the past. "Yeah, kiddo, I'm just thinking about how far we've come. And how we've got each other, which is all we really need." Mia leaned into my side, a content sigh escaping her. "Yeah, we do. And now you've got Tom and Jack, too. It's funny how life works out. 2 years ago, I was scared, unsure of the future, fighting to keep Mia safe and happy. Now, here we were, planning a wedding, looking at colleges, and living a life full of love and laughter." That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tom came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You look happy," he murmured into my hair. "I am. I really am," I replied, leaning back into his embrace. Life's turned out better than I could have hoped. With Mia's laughter floating out from her room where she was probably choosing songs for her next concert, and Tom's steady presence at my side, I knew this was exactly where I was meant to be. Moving forward, one beautiful, ordinary day at a time. Our house was a palace, sure, but a cold and echoing one. Marble floors, fancy furniture that looked like it belonged on TV, not under my feet, that was my life. Dad, Richard the Great they called him at his construction company, built it all from scratch. He loved me to pieces, his only kid, but seeing him was like catching a glimpse of a shooting star, there and gone too fast. "Gotta chase that next project, kiddo," he'd say with a wink, his booming voice the only warmth in the giant house. My mom, Isabella, well, she was the ice queen on a frozen throne. 18 years younger than Dad, she had cheekbones sharper than a diamond and a closet bigger than my entire room, overflowing with clothes that sparkled like disco balls. Her days were a whirlwind of fancy salons with French names I couldn't pronounce, massages that cost more than my bike, and gossip sessions with her friends who looked like they were all carved from the same mold. The only time Mom ever seemed to remember I existed was when she needed someone to boss around. "Those jeans are a mess, honey," she'd sneer, her voice dripping with fake sugar. "Haven't I taught you how to keep things tidy?" Funny thing was, the house was spotless, thanks to a whole army of maids who scurried around like silent mice. But if I dared to sit down and watch cartoons after school, here she'd come, faster than a cheetah after lunch. "Shouldn't you be learning something useful, Lily?" she'd snap, her perfectly painted nails tapping a sharp rhythm on the counter. Like how to clean these floors properly before you ruin them? Useful? Cleaning floors? I looked at Dad, who was just coming through the door, grass stains on his jeans and a smile on his face. He'd been playing catch with the neighborhood kids again. "Leave her alone, Isabella," he'd rumble, his voice warm and deep. "She's got plenty of time for chores later. How about some ice cream sundaes, champ?" My treat. Dad was my hero, my best friend. He'd wrestle with me on the floor, his booming laugh filling the house, a stark contrast to Mom's constant complaints. He taught me how to throw a perfect spiral, how to fix a leaky faucet, and most importantly, how to be kind, even when the world felt cold and empty, just like this giant house. The year I turned 15 was supposed to be different. Driver's ed, maybe a summer job at the ice cream shop down the street, all the normal teenage stuff. Instead, it became the year everything went sideways, faster than a roller coaster gone rogue. It started with a cough. A nagging, wet cough that wouldn't quit. Dad, who could usually shake off a cold in a day, just kept getting worse. His booming laugh faded into a raspy wheeze, his once strong hands grew thin and trembled slightly when he held mine. Doctors became a constant presence in our house. Stern-faced men and women who spoke in hushed tones that sent chills down my spine. A cruel diagnosis, laryngeal cancer. Dad, ever the optimist, kept a brave face. "Just a little bug," he'd say, his voice weak but his eyes full of the same warmth I knew and loved. "Nothing a few trips to the doc can't fix." Those trips turned into hospital stays, harsh treatments that left him drained and pale. The vibrant man who could build a skyscraper from the ground up was reduced to a frail shadow, his once booming voice barely a whisper. I spent every spare minute by his bedside, holding his hand, reading him stories, praying for a miracle. "Don't worry, champ," he'd rasp, his eyes filled with concern. "I'm gonna be alright. You're gonna be alright." Worry? I was drowning in it. The thought of a world without Dad's booming laugh, his rough but comforting hugs, was unbearable. Mom, however, remained a constant source of irritation. While Dad fought for his life, she continued her self-absorbed routine. "Honestly, Richard," she'd complain, her voice clipped and cold, "you're giving me a headache with all this coughing. Maybe you should just sleep in the guest room, it's keeping me awake." One thing I did notice, though, was a subtle shift in her appearance. Maybe it was just me, but her designer clothes seemed to fit a little tighter, her perfectly flat stomach developing a slight bulge. It was a bizarre contrast to Dad's worsening condition, a small, unsettling detail amidst the storm. Then came the day, a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. Mom was on her way out, a fresh manicure appointment awaiting her. "Don't forget the black polish, darling," she called back from the doorway. "Black always goes best with morning." Morning? What was she talking about? Before I could question it, the phone rang. Mom answered, her voice dripping with fake concern. A few moments later, she hung up, her face a mask. "Well," she sighed, a strange, almost satisfied glint in her eyes. "Looks like today needs to be a black manicure after all." My heart hammered in my chest. A cold dread wrapped its icy fingers around me. What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Mom's mask slipped for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something cold and calculating crossing her face before it was replaced by a perfectly practiced frown. "Just some unfortunate news, Lily," she said, her voice back to its usual icy tone. "Looks like you'll be needing a strong woman to take care of you now." The days that followed were a blur of black crepe and forced smiles. The funeral home transformed our living room into a sterile, flower-filled showroom. Mom, ever the drama queen, reveled in the attention. Black lace or sweetheart neckline? She agonized, parading a seemingly endless stream of dresses in front of the mirror. Her friend, a woman with bleached blonde hair and a permanent pout, cooed in approval. "Oh darling, the sweetheart neckline. So Audrey Hepburn at her husband's funeral. Absolutely tragic and chic. Don't you think it's a little excessive?" I ventured, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's eyes narrowed. Excessive? Honey, this is for your father. We need to show his friends and family how much we respected him. Respected? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. By showing off your cleavage? The air crackled with tension. Mom's perfectly painted smile faltered for a second, replaced by a flash of something cold and dangerous. You watch your tone, young lady, she hissed, her voice low and menacing. These are adult matters you wouldn't understand. The adult matters turned out to be endless phone calls with florists and caterers, each conversation punctuated by Mom's theatrical sighs and demands for the absolute best. My grandparents, bless their hearts, tried to shield me from the worst of it, but the strained silences and worried glances spoke volumes. The funeral itself was a performance. Mom, draped in a ridiculously elaborate black dress that clung to her curves like a second skin, played the grieving widow to the hilt. Tears streamed down her perfectly made-up face as she clung to the arms of various concerned-looking relatives. Later that night, as I scrolled through social media in a daze, a familiar face popped up on my feed. There she was, Mom, in all her tragic and chic glory, the funeral photo plastered across her Instagram page. The caption, dripping with saccharine sentiment, spoke of her undying love and devotion to my father. The love of my life, gone too soon, it read. A week had crawled by since Dad's funeral, each day a heavy weight on my chest. Mom, however, seemed to thrive in the silence. The endless parade of black dresses was replaced by a return to her usual flamboyant wardrobe, her smile a little too bright, her eyes a little too cold. One evening, as I trudged up the stairs after another day of forced pleasantries at school, the sound of unfamiliar laughter filtered through the air. I froze, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The living room door was ajar, light spilling out into the hallway. Taking a deep breath, I peeked inside. There, sprawled on our plush sofa, was a young man who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine. He was all tan skin, perfect teeth, and designer stubble. Mom, perched beside him like a preening peacock, was batting her eyelashes with a practiced innocence I hadn't seen since I was a toddler. Lily, she purred, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. This is Michael, my fiancé. Fiancé? I repeated, my voice barely a croak. Mom's smile faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before it was replaced by a too bright cheer. Yes, darling. Isn't that wonderful? Michael is going to be living with us now. Michael, who hadn't even acknowledged my existence until now, finally grunted a greeting. Before I could process this latest absurdity, Mom continued, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. And guess what else, honey bunch? We're expecting. Expecting? My mind reeled. Not only did she have a new husband-to-be a week after Dad's funeral, but she was also pregnant? It was all too much to take in. What about, Dad? I stammered, the words catching in my throat. Isn't this a little? A little what? Mom snapped, her mask of cheer slipping for a moment. A little inconvenient? Don't be ridiculous. Life goes on, darling. And besides, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Michael here makes me truly happy. Something your father, bless his soul, was never quite capable of. Fury, hot and raw, bubbled up inside me. You never loved him, did you? I spat, my voice shaking with rage. You cheated on him. Mom's eyes narrowed. The smile was completely gone now, replaced by a steely glint. Perhaps, she admitted with a cold laugh. But that's none of your concern, is it? Now, from now on, you'll do as Michael and I say. You'll help with the housework, of course, and then you'll be a wonderful nanny to your new sibling. Over my dead body, I choked out, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Don't get sassy with me, young lady, Mom hissed, her voice low and dangerous. This is my house, and you'll do what I tell you, or you'll get out. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I straightened my spine, a newfound resolve hardening my voice. I wouldn't stay under the same roof with you for another minute even if you begged me, I declared, my gaze unwavering. You may have gotten rid of Dad, but you won't control me. Mom's face contorted in fury. Get out then, she shrieked, lunging towards me. She grabbed me by the shoulders and pushed me out the door. And don't come crawling back when you have nowhere else to go, she bellowed after me. I didn't answer. The front door slammed shut behind me with a satisfying thud. Snow swirled around the streetlights, casting an eerie glow on the deserted sidewalk. I was in my school clothes and sneakers, completely unprepared for the winter chill. But the sting of the cold was nothing compared to the burning betrayal in my heart. Looking down at my flimsy clothes, I spotted the abandoned garage across the street. Dad used to keep his old tools and some winter gear there. Maybe, just maybe, there was something I could use to keep warm for the short walk. The garage was a treasure trove of forgotten memories. In the back corner, under a dusty tarp, I spotted a familiar shape, Dad's old hunting jacket. It was worn and faded, but the thick leather promised some protection from the biting wind. With shaking hands, I dialed a taxi, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. The wait seemed to stretch on forever, each passing minute a small eternity. Finally, the headlights pierced the darkness, a beacon of hope in the cold night. My grandparents' porch light cast a warm glow as I stepped out of the taxi. Tears welled up in my eyes again, this time a mix of relief and sorrow. My grandma opened the door before I could even knock, her face etched with worry. Lily? What on earth? Her voice trailed off as she took in my appearance. Honey, you're freezing. Come in, come in. She ushered me inside, wrapping a thick blanket around my shoulders. Grandpa was right behind her, his face grim as he took in my tear-streaked cheeks and the oversized jacket. What happened, sweetheart? He asked, his voice gruff but full of concern. I took a shaky breath, the warmth of the house slowly seeping into my bones. Then, in a torrent of words, I poured out everything, Mom's cold behavior after Dad's death, the fiancé, the pregnancy, and finally, the cruel revelation. My voice cracked as I spoke, the raw pain and betrayal spilling out into the room. By the time I finished, I was sobbing uncontrollably, my body racked with hurt. Grandma held me tight, her silence a comforting presence. Grandpa, after a moment, cleared his throat. There's something you should know, Lily, he began, his voice low and serious. Before your father passed away. He paused, his gaze flickering to Grandma before continuing. He knew all about her cheating and pregnancy, and well. He hesitated, then met my eyes. He had a lawyer come in and change his will. My heart skipped a beat. Change his will? Yes, Grandma chimed in, taking my hand. You see, honey, your father loved you more than anything in the world. It means that you are the sole heir to your father's estate. My jaw dropped. Everything? Everything, Grandma confirmed with a sad smile. But because of your age, you can't fully access the money until you graduate from college. Until then, a legal guardian needs to manage it. Not Mom, I blurted out before he could finish. The thought of her controlling Dad's money meant for me, was unbearable. Grandpa and Grandma exchanged a knowing look. Of course not, Grandma said, her voice firm. That's why we need to talk about custody. But to take you away from your mother, we need proof of her unsuitability. Proof? I reached for my phone, a mischievous glint entering my eyes. I have plenty of that. Over the past year, in a misguided attempt to protect myself, I'd started recording some of my arguments with Mom. The last conversation, the one where she kicked me out, was there in all its ugly glory. With trembling fingers, I played it back for my grandparents. The sound of my mother's cruel words filled the room, each sentence a fresh blow. By the time the recording ended, a tense silence hung heavy in the air. Then Grandpa cleared his throat. This is more than enough, Lily. We'll get you a lawyer first thing tomorrow. You won't be going back to that house. Relief washed over me, warm and welcome. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about safety, about being in a place where I was loved and valued. A week had crawled by since the blow-up with Mom. One sunny and cold afternoon, as I was helping Grandma cook a pie, a loud, insistent pounding shattered the quiet. I froze, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Grandma straightened up, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "That sounds like trouble," she muttered, brushing her hands off the flour. Before we could even exchange another word, the front door swung open with a bang, revealing a sight that made my blood run cold. Mom stood there, her face flushed with anger and desperation. Her hair was a mess, her clothes looked like they'd been slept in, and her eyes held a manic glint that sent shivers down my spine. "There you are," she shrieked, her voice laced with a barely contained fury. "You little ingrate. How could you do this to me?" Grandma stepped forward, her voice firm but unwavering. "Lily doesn't have to do anything, dear. She's here of her own free will." Mom scoffed, her gaze darting around the room before landing on me. "Free will? Don't be ridiculous. You've filled her head with lies about me." "Lies?" I echoed, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're the one who lied, Mom. You lied to Dad, you lied to me, and now you have the nerve to play the victim? You never loved me and Dad." Mom's face contorted in fury. "Don't you dare talk about your father like that. And love? You think that dusty old man was capable of love? He was boring, Lily. A drag. I deserved more." Her words hung heavy in the air, a cruel and selfish justification for her actions. My fists clenched at my sides, the anger bubbling inside me threatening to boil over. "So you married him for money, then cheated on him while he was still alive?" I spat, my voice dripping with disgust. "And now you're angry because you're not going to get your claws into his inheritance?" Mom's face turned ashen, her bravado crumbling under the weight of my words. "Look," she said, her voice cracking with desperation, "I know I messed up. But can't we just forget all that? I found out about the new will, Lily. You have everything now. You can help me, can't you? I'm pregnant, for crying out loud. I have nowhere to go." Her words hung heavy in the air, a desperate plea for a lifeline. A part of me, a tiny, insignificant part, flickered with a misplaced sense of pity. But then I remembered the countless nights I'd spent alone. "Those were your choices, Mom," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "And now you have to face the consequences." 2 months flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers, court dates, social worker visits, it felt like my life had become a legal drama. Mom, unsurprisingly, contested the custody hearing tooth and nail. The courtroom was a tense battleground. Mom, dressed in a cheap-looking suit and overly dramatic makeup, sat across from me, a picture of fake concern. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "I am Lily's mother. I love her dearly, and I'm her only living parent. Taking her away from me would be a travesty." Her words were like nails on a chalkboard, a stark contrast to the cruel reality I knew. My lawyer, a sharp woman with a steely gaze, wasted no time in presenting her case. The recordings I'd made played on a small speaker in the courtroom, each snipped conversation a damning indictment of Mom's character. Her voice, dripping with contempt and frustration, filled the room, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Then came the final blow, the recording of the night she kicked me out. The raw fear and confusion in my voice, the chilling indifference in hers, painted a picture 1,000 words couldn't express. As the last recording ended, a heavy silence descended upon the courtroom. Even the judge, a stern but fair-looking woman, seemed taken aback. Looking directly at Mom, I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice surprisingly steady. "Your Honor," I said, "does this sound like the voice of a loving mother? Does this sound like someone who deserves to raise a child?" Mom opened her mouth to retort, but the judge held up a hand, silencing her. "The evidence presented is compelling," she said, her voice firm. "The recordings paint a clear picture of a dysfunctional and emotionally abusive relationship. Mrs. Miller," she addressed my mother directly, "your behavior towards your daughter has been documented and deemed unacceptable. Therefore, this court grants full custody of Lily to her grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it felt like I could breathe again for the first time in months. Grandma reached out and squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with unshed tears. Grandpa, ever stoic, offered me a gruff but genuine smile. A few days later, we stood outside the house I'd once called home. The eviction notice, a cold formality, felt like a badge of honor. Mom and her now fuming boyfriend were huddled by the door, their faces a mixture of anger and desperation. "Lily, honey, please," Mom whined, her voice laced with desperation. "Can't we just talk about this? I know I messed up, but I'm your mother. And I'm pregnant. We have nowhere to go." She gestured dramatically to her noticeably swollen belly, a desperate attempt to tug at my heartstrings. But this time it didn't work. "You had your chance, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "You made your choices, and now you have to face the consequences. Besides," I added, "you have Dad's savings, enough for a decent apartment and a comfortable life for you and your new family." The mention of the money hit a nerve. Mom's face contorted in fury, but this time, it was laced with a hint of fear. "You wouldn't dare cut me off," she hissed, her voice brittle. "I don't have to," I replied coolly. "You'll have access to a monthly stipend, enough to cover your basic needs. But that's all. Consider it my charity." Mom opened her mouth to argue, but the look in my eyes must have stopped her. With a final glare in my direction, she stormed off, her boyfriend trailing behind like a kicked puppy. 5 years had melted away like summer snow. Graduation from high school was a bittersweet affair, a celebration of achievement tinged with the pang of leaving a familiar chapter behind. Now, with a brimming acceptance letter in hand, I stood on the precipice of a new adventure, college. The University of Economics loomed ahead, a bustling hive of knowledge and ambition. Grandma fussed over my dorm room, insisting on rearranging the furniture for maximum efficiency. Grandpa, ever the pragmatist, helped me set up my laptop and internet connection, muttering about the outrageous cost of higher education. "Don't worry, Grandpa," I said, giving him a hug. "I'll make the most of it. This is Dad's company I'll be running someday, remember?" He squeezed me back, his gruff voice softening. "That's my girl. Your father would be proud." The mention of Dad always brought a lump to my throat. These past years had been a constant dance between grief and gratitude. Grief for the father I barely had the chance to know, and gratitude for the loving grandparents who had stepped up when I needed them most. College life was a whirlwind of lectures, study groups, and caffeine-fueled all-nighters. It wasn't easy, but I threw myself into it with a fervor that surprised even myself. News about Mom trickled in occasionally, delivered in hushed tones by well-meaning family friends. Apparently, she'd given birth to a stillborn child, a tragedy that had only deepened the chasm between her and the world. Her boyfriend, the one who'd abandoned ship when the comfortable life in a luxurious house evaporated, was nowhere to be seen. Honestly, none of it fazed me. The woman who had borne me was a stranger, a ghost from a past life. I had no room for negativity in my life, not when I was busy building a future where hard work and determination were the cornerstones of success. My name's Kimberly, just your average IT nerd with a knack for keeping things locked down, cyber-wise, that is. Since the pandemic took my folks, it's just been me, alone with their stuff and this valuable painting they left me. That thing's old, like handed down from my great-great-grandma old, signed by some big-shot English artist. Not that I'm selling, it looks too good in my living room. Work's been my life, literally steps from my apartment, and when I'm not there, you'll find me buried in my studies or firing up content for my YouTube channel. That's where the shy, awkward Kimberly becomes Cyber Kim, the guru of data protection. My videos are straightforward, nothing fancy, but they do the trick. I keep my friend circle tight. There's Sarah, a classmate from way back, and her husband, Mike, who's a lawyer. We'd catch up over cheesy slices or stuff ourselves with pasta at some Italian joint downtown, talking about everything and nothing. They're cool, the kind of friends who don't mind my tech rambles. So, this one day, I'm checking my channel comments, and there's a message from this guy, Tom. Not your typical nice vid stuff, he actually asked smart questions about firewall vulnerabilities. We ended up DMing, and let me tell you, the guy knew his bytes and bits. He was like, "Hey, I'm Tom. Caught your latest video. Could use a bit of advice on setting up a secure home network. Got a minute?" I replied, "Sure thing, shoot. Just promise you're not trying to hack your neighbor's Wi-Fi." We clicked right away. Chatting with Tom was easy. It felt like geeking out with a buddy, which, for me, was a big deal. Most guys don't get past my firewall, if you know what I mean. After a week of back and forth messages, he dropped, "You know, we should meet up. Could use a personal consult, and maybe coffee?" I typed back, "Coffee sounds good. There's this quiet place near my work. Friday?" "Friday it is. See you there, Kim." Meeting Tom felt like a big step. I mean, here I was, a girl who'd rather spend her Friday nights updating software, stepping out to meet some guy from the internet. But, something about him seemed legit. The day came and there I was, early at the cafe, fidgeting with my phone, scrolling through code updates to calm my nerves. Tom walked in, casual, with a smile that knocked me a bit off my protocol. "Kimberly? Hi, I'm Tom. Thanks for coming out." I stood up, shaking his hand. "Hi, Tom. Hope this place is geek-friendly." We dove deep into tech talk, but it wasn't just that. Tom was funny in a witty, not over-the-top kind of way. He made tech talk feel like a cool hangout, not just a Q&A session. As we wrapped up, Tom said, "This was great. We should do it again, maybe make it a regular thing?" I nodded. "I'd like that. And maybe next time, I can save your phone from more than just theoretical threats." Walking back to my apartment, I couldn't help but smile. Maybe it was okay to let someone in, even just a bit. After all, even a cybersecurity expert needs a break from the screen sometimes. It was a sunny Saturday when Tom suggested we go meet his mom. He'd been talking about it for a while, like it was some big deal. "It's just lunch, Kim. But, you know, she's kinda old school, likes to know who's who in my life." I agreed, not because I was dying to meet his mom, but I figured if things were getting serious with us, I might as well get it over with. We drove out to a quiet suburb, houses all neat in a row, gardens manicured. Tom's childhood home looked just like him, orderly and tidy. His mom, Linda, was waiting at the door as we pulled up. She was all smiles, but her eyes did that up-down scan, like a security system sizing me up. "Tommy. And you must be Kimberly. I've heard so much about you," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a frisk. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Anderson," I managed, stepping into the house that smelled of roast and something sweet baking. Lunch was on the table, everything laid out like a photo shoot for a family magazine. We sat down, and the interrogation began. Linda served the roast and fired off her first question with the same motion. "So, Kimberly, Tom tells me you work in computers? That tech stuff?" "IT specialist," I corrected, passing the potatoes. "I work on cybersecurity." "Oh, fancy," she said, almost sarcastically. "That make good money?" I choked on my water a bit. Tom jumped in. "Mom, come on. Let's not get into all that." Linda waved him off. "I'm just making conversation." "So, Kimberly, do you own your place then? Must be nice, being independent." I nodded, unsure how much to reveal. "Yes, I have my own apartment." "Bought it all by yourself? No help from anyone?" Her tone was curious, like she was digging for gold in my past. "Just me," I said, feeling a bit cornered. Tom kicked me lightly under the table, giving me a just-go-with-it look. The meal dragged on, Linda's questions bouncing from my family background to my long-term career plans. I tried to steer the talk away from the interrogation vibe, but Linda had a talent for circling back. Finally, dessert was served, and I thought I'd use the chance to flip the script. "Mrs. Anderson, Tom speaks so highly of you. Must have been a great mom to raise such a gentleman. Linda softened a bit. Well, I did my best. Tommy was always a good boy. Not much trouble, right, Tom? Tom smiled. Never, Mom. Kimberly's been great, too. She's really smart, knows her stuff. You should see her channel on YouTube, she's got quite the following. Oh, a YouTuber too? Linda's eyebrows went up. That's secure, is it? I smiled back, trying not to show my annoyance. Linda's obsession with money was somewhat tiresome. A year flew by faster than I'd ever imagined, and there I was, Kimberly Anderson, married and trying to adapt to a whole new chapter. Tom and I tied the knot in a simple ceremony, just close friends and family, and soon after, we settled into my apartment. Life as a married woman was supposed to be sweet, right? Well, it would have been, if only his mom, Linda, hadn't taken an overzealous interest in our lives, especially the financial part. It started with innocent visits. Linda would pop over, supposedly to see how we were settling in. But soon, these visits turned into full-on inspections. I'd find her eyes trailing after the new blender or the TV, and later, she'd casually mention how much those items cost online. Really getting your money's worth with that blender, huh, she'd say, scrolling through her phone to show me the exact price. But it wasn't just the comments. The frequency of her visits increased, turning our home into her daytime retreat. Initially, it was just coffee, but soon she was around so much that I barely had any downtime in my own space. One day, I tried to hint at the issue gently. Linda, don't you think it's great to have some alone time at home? I read this article about how solitude can be really refreshing. She just smiled, missing the hint entirely, or choosing to. Oh, I get plenty of alone time at my place, dear. That's why I come here, for a change of scenery and some company. Frustrated, I started scheduling errands or visits to Sarah's whenever Linda was over. But Linda, ever the persistent one, caught on and followed me one day. Kimberly, why don't we grab a bite at that new cafe downtown? My treat, she suggested one afternoon as I was almost out the door. Reluctantly, I agreed, thinking maybe public setting, different conversation. We settled into the cafe, and Linda ordered lavishly, appetizers, main courses, even dessert. After the meal, she patted her purse, then looked up with feigned shock. Oh dear, I've left my wallet at home. Can you believe it? There was a familiar twist in my gut as I reached for my purse and paid the bill, trying to keep my face neutral to avoid a scene. But the frustration was building. Once we got back to the apartment, I couldn't hold back anymore. Linda, I think we need to set some boundaries. You can't just show up and treat this place like your own. She looked taken aback, her face dropping into a mask of offense. I'm just trying to spend time with my son and you, Kimberly. I didn't realize my company was such an inconvenience. Before I could reply, Tom walked in, catching the tail end of our conversation. Kimberly, what's going on here? Why are you speaking to my mom like that? I turned to him, the day's frustrations boiling over. Tom, we need to talk about boundaries. Your mom can't just... But he cut me off, his tone firm yet annoyed. Mom means well, Kimberly. You're overreacting. Just try to be more welcoming, okay? Linda left soon after, her exit swift and silent, but the air remained thick with tension. For a few weeks after our last unpleasant exchange, Linda stayed away from our apartment. I was actually starting to relax again, enjoying the peace. Then one day, as I was dusting, I noticed something off about the painting my parents left me, the one that meant so much because of its history and sentimental value. It was hanging crookedly, which was odd because I always made sure it was perfect. Frowning, I straightened it and then stepped back. Something didn't feel right. That's when I decided to ask Tom about it. Hey, did you move the painting? I asked casually during dinner. Tom didn't look up from his plate. Oh, yeah. Mom took it to get it checked out. She wanted to know how much it's worth. I stopped mid-bite, my fork hanging in the air. She what? Why would she do that without asking us? Tom shrugged, still not meeting my eye. Mom's just curious, you know? You're always overreacting about this stuff. Deciding to confront Linda directly, I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring, as if she'd been expecting my call. Kimberly, dear. Good news about that painting. It's worth $500,000. We should really think about selling it. Her words made my head spin. Linda, first off, it's not we. And you had no right to take my painting and have it appraised. It's not yours to sell. Linda's voice turned cold. You're being unreasonable, Kimberly. And with that, she hung up on me. The next day, I came home from work earlier than usual, needing to clear my head after the bizarre conversation. As I unlocked the door, I could hear voices inside. When I stepped in, Linda and Tom abruptly stopped talking. Linda glanced at Tom, then at me, and hurried out with barely a goodbye. What was that about? I asked Tom as I hung up my coat. Nothing important, he muttered, but his voice was too casual. The weirdness of it all made me uneasy. I walked into my office and noticed right away that things weren't as I'd left them. My computer was shifted, and papers were out of place. My heart raced. This wasn't just a simple visit, something else was going on. That night, after Tom went to sleep, I went online and ordered a video camera with a sound recording function. I didn't tell Tom. The next day, I installed it in my office, making sure it was hidden from view. I also moved the painting from the living room to my study, hoping it would be safer there. With the camera set up, I threw myself into a new project at work to keep my mind occupied. The thought of Linda and Tom scheming had me on edge, but I needed to focus on something positive. My work was something I could control, unlike the chaos that seemed to be taking over my personal life. It was an ordinary Tuesday, or so I thought when I left work early feeling under the weather. Opening the door, I found Linda and Tom lounging in the living room, both as casual as could be. The sight stopped me dead in my tracks. Tom, why aren't you at work? He looked up, unfazed, and shrugged. Quit my job. You earn enough for both of us, don't you? Linda nodded in agreement, her smile tight. Exactly, Kimberly. Why stress him out with a job when you do so well for yourself? My mouth fell open. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just a visit, it was a revelation of their true colors. Are you kidding me? You quit your job without discussing it with me, and you, Linda, what part do you even play in this? Tom stood up, his demeanor chillingly calm. Look, Kim, let's not make this ugly. You have the money. I need support now. The room spun a little as their words sank in. Support? You mean you want me to fund your laziness? Both of you just sitting around planning how to milk me for everything I'm worth? Linda's eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms. Watch your tone, Kimberly. We're family. That was the last straw. Family? No, this is not what family does. I want a divorce, Tom. The smile that crept onto Tom's face was one I didn't recognize. It was cold, almost pleased. Fine by me. And I'll be asking for alimony, seeing as I'm jobless now. The audacity of his threat stunned me. I felt a mix of rage and disbelief churn in my stomach. Without another word, he grabbed a duffel bag from behind the couch, clearly pre-packed, and strolled out the door. Linda threw me a look that could curdle milk and hissed, "See you in court, Kimberly," before following him out. Once they left, the silence in the apartment was deafening. It was like waking up from a nightmare, except the monsters were real, and I had invited them into my life. I called Sarah, my voice shaking as I recounted what had just happened. She was furious on my behalf. Kim, this is insane. You need protection, legal protection. Mike can help. I headed to Sarah and Mike's place. Mike was ready with both sympathy and lawyer mode activated. Kimberly, we're going to take care of this. First thing, we'll file for divorce, and don't worry about the alimony threats. We'll counter every move they make. Tom quitting his job like that, it's manipulative, and we'll prove it. After talking things through, I returned to my apartment, feeling more determined. I was about to divorce the man I thought I knew, and battle his and his mother's greed. It was daunting, but necessary. I couldn't let them destroy what I'd worked so hard to build. The morning of the first court session for our divorce felt like gearing up for battle. I wore my most professional outfit, trying to project confidence despite feeling anything but. My stomach was in knots as I walked into the courtroom with Mike, my lawyer and friend, at my side. I had prepped myself for a tough day, but nothing could have readied me for the theater that unfolded. As soon as Tom walked into the courtroom, he transformed into someone I barely recognized. His suit was a bit too big, his hair unusually disheveled, and his eyes downcast. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, the perfect picture of misery and misfortune. His mother, Linda, clung to his arm, her face etched with concern, playing her part flawlessly. The proceedings began, and Tom's lawyer wasted no time painting him as the ultimate victim. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client has been left to fend for himself after his wife, the sole breadwinner, abruptly ended their marriage when he needed her most. After losing his job, Mr. Anderson was not only abandoned emotionally but is now facing financial ruin." Tom took the stand, his voice shaky. "I did everything at home, Your Honor. Cooked, cleaned. I supported Kimberly in every way, hoping to ease her burdens. And when I lost my job, she turned her back on me." Linda testified next, her performance Oscar-worthy. "My son's life with Kimberly was a nightmare. She controlled everything, including the finances. When he lost his job, instead of support, what did he get? Abandonment. Kimberly is not the person she appears to be." The hypocrisy was staggering. I felt a cold anger settle in as I listened to their twisted version of our life together. When it was finally Mike's turn to cross-examine, he did his best to dismantle their stories. "Isn't it true, Mr. Anderson, that you quit your job voluntarily and without discussing it with my client?" Tom stuttered, faltering under Mike's steady gaze. "Well, it was a mutual decision, really." Despite Mike's efforts, I could tell the judge was moved by Tom's emotional display. The sympathy in his eyes as he nodded at Tom spoke volumes. As we filed out of the courtroom, Linda couldn't resist a parting shot. She sidled up to me, a triumphant smirk curling her lips. "You might think you're smart, Kimberly, but you'll see. You're going to lose. And when you do, I'll take every last cent from you." As soon as I got home, the silence of my apartment was suffocating, and the reality of potentially losing in court weighed heavily on me. I needed support, a game plan, and maybe a slice or two of pizza to lighten the mood. I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Hey, can you and Mike swing by tonight? I think it's time we craft a real strategy over some pizza." They arrived with boxes of steaming pizza and a determination in their eyes that matched my own resolve. We set up camp in my living room, the coffee table now an impromptu war room scattered with legal pads, pens, and now, dinner. "We need a breakthrough, something concrete to turn the tables," Mike said, opening a box and handing me a slice of pepperoni. I nodded, taking a bite and trying to gather my thoughts. "I know, but everything up to now just seems circumstantial. They're playing the victim too well." Sarah poured us all coffees, her brow furrowed in thought. "We just need to catch them in a lie, something undeniable." As we ate, the conversation continued to circle around potential strategies and legal angles. But it was when we were winding down, our plates cleared and the second round of coffee in hand, that a seemingly innocent observation changed everything. "Kimberly, didn't your painting used to look different?" Sarah asked, nodding towards the large canvas in my living room. I turned to look, my heart skipping a beat. The colors did seem brighter, more vivid than I remembered. A sudden thought struck me, and I jumped up. "The camera. I set up a camera in my office a while back. I completely forgot about it with everything going on." We rushed to my office, where I fired up my computer and began pulling up the footage from the hidden camera. The files loaded, and we watched intently as the days clicked by in fast forward. Then, there it was. The day Tom and Linda had been alone in my apartment. The video showed them entering the room, glancing around nervously before approaching the painting. Their voices were low, but picked up clearly by the camera's mic. "Make sure you swap it out smoothly. No one will ever know. Once we sell the real one, that's $500,000 we're sitting on." Tom's voice was a whisper, but the greed in it was loud and clear. Linda's laughter was chilling. "And once she's out of the picture with the divorce, we'll live like royalty. No more hiding, no more scrimping. Just wait, that alimony will be the cherry on top." My hands were shaking as I paused the video. We looked at each other, the gravity of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just petty theft, it was a calculated betrayal. "We've got them, Kim. This is it. This video could discredit them completely in court," Mike said, his voice steady and confident. The rest of the evening was spent in a flurry of planning. Mike outlined our next steps, detailing how we would introduce the video evidence in court, ensuring its impact would be undeniable. Sarah helped me draft a statement, her words crafting a clear, concise narrative of betrayal and deceit. The morning of the final court session was unlike any other. As we entered the courtroom, I caught sight of Tom and Linda, smug expressions planted firmly on their faces. They had no idea what was coming. The court settled, and the judge called the session to order. Mike was the first to speak, his voice filling the room. "Your Honor, we request permission to submit new evidence crucial to this case." The judge eyed him curiously. "And what might this evidence be?" "A video with audio, Your Honor, revealing the true intentions behind Mr. Anderson and his mother's actions." Permission was granted with a nod, and the courtroom hushed as Mike connected the USB drive to the court's AV system. I watched Tom and Linda, their confidence faltering as the screen flickered to life. The video played, their voices echoing through the courtroom. Tom's scheming words and Linda's greedy laughter filled the air, the shock and murmuring of the audience growing with each passing second. As the recording ended, the judge looked sternly at Tom and Linda, who had turned pale, their eyes wide with fear. The judge banged his gavel, his voice booming. "Based on this undeniable evidence, I declare the marriage between Kimberly and Tom Anderson dissolved. Mr. Anderson's claim for alimony is hereby rejected." He wasn't finished. Turning to his assistant, he barked, "Call the police. We have theft and conspiracy to commit fraud." The courtroom erupted into whispers and gasps as officers entered and approached Tom and Linda. Linda's composure broke, tears streaming down her face as she was handcuffed. "I'm sorry, Kimberly. I had debts. I didn't mean." "Save it, Linda. You did mean to," I cut her off, turning away as the police led them out of the courtroom. The painting was returned to me a few days later. Life slowly returned to normal. I poured my energy into my work and my YouTube channel, helping people protect themselves from the very deceit I'd experienced. 2 years passed. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tom, his voice hesitant. "Kimberly, I'm out now. We're living in a rented place." I was hoping maybe we could try again. I've changed, really." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter yet liberating. "Tom, you never change. You're just out of options. Goodbye." Hanging up, I felt a final piece of the past slip away. I was free, truly free, and as I sat back at my desk, planning my next video, I knew that no matter what came my way, I was ready. I'm Ella, and here's how everything started going sideways. It used to be just me, my little sister Lily, Mom, and Dad. Life was ordinary, nothing flashy, but it was ours. Dad worked fixing cars and Mom was a librarian until her friend, Janet, talked her into one of those personal growth workshops. It didn't take long for that to flip everything upside down. I remember the evening it all changed. We were sitting around the dinner table, a mix of laughter and the clinking of dishes filling the room. Dad had just cracked a joke about his day at the shop when Mom dropped her news. "I'm quitting my job at the library. she announced, reaching for the mashed potatoes as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell. Dad paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Quit? Why the hell would you quit now, Karen? Mom's eyes lit up with that scary kind of excitement. I met some people at the seminar. They're into stock trading, real estate, all sorts of investments that could make us real money, not just pennies. You're talking about gambling with our savings, Karen. That seminar's messing with your head, Dad snapped, his voice a mix of worry and anger. It's not gambling, Tom. It's about taking risks to move forward. You're just too scared to see it, Mom fired back. That's how most dinners went after that seminar. Mom chasing dreams of big bucks and Dad trying to pull her back to reality. Their arguments felt louder, rougher, and nothing like the parents I knew. One day, I came home from school to find Mom at the kitchen table, papers and her laptop spread out like she was plotting a takeover. Hey, Mom, what's all this? I asked, dropping my backpack. It's my future, Elle. I'm done living paycheck to paycheck. It's time we live like the rich, she replied without looking up. I've invested some money in a promising stock. And tomorrow, I'm meeting with a group about a real estate venture. It's all going to change for us, you'll see. I wanted to believe her, really. But it felt like we were stepping onto a roller coaster without any safety harnesses. And what if it doesn't work out? What happens then? Mom finally looked up, her gaze fierce. It will work out. I'm making sure of it. Days turned into weeks, and the tension didn't let up. Dad hated the gambling, he called it that no matter what fancy name Mom gave it. I'd hear them at night, their voices raised in another heated debate. You're throwing away everything we've worked for, Karen. Those schemes are nothing but money pits. And you're just too chicken to seize a real opportunity, Tom. I'm trying to build something bigger here, and I don't need your negativity. Arguments between Mom and Dad were daily events, each more heated than the last. The stakes kept getting higher, and so did the tension. It was like living on a ticking time bomb, waiting for it to blow. One Thursday night, the air in the kitchen was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad had just discovered Mom pulled a hefty sum from their joint savings account. I was trying to focus on my homework at the dining table, but the rising voices made it impossible. Karen, where's the money from our savings? It's nearly half gone. Dad's voice boomed from the doorway as he slapped some papers on the table. Mom, who was chopping vegetables, didn't even flinch. I invested it, Tom. It's going into a fund that promises triple the return. We talked about this. No, you talked, and I said no. When will you stop this madness? Dad was red in the face, his hands balled into fists. It's not madness, it's opportunity. You'd know if you weren't so stubbornly glued to your penny-pinching ways. Mom shot back, her voice icy. I looked over at Lily, who was quietly doodling in her notebook, her small shoulders hunched up to her ears. It broke my heart to see her like this, trying to shut out the storm around her. Your opportunities are bleeding us dry, Karen. We can't even pay this month's bills on time, because of your investments. Dad's voice cracked with frustration. And we'll make up for it tenfold when the returns come in. Just wait and see, Tom. Stop being such a pessimist, Mom retorted, slamming the knife down on the counter. Days passed, and the fights continued, each leaving a deeper mark than the last. I found myself dreading coming home after school, lingering at the library or wandering the streets just to avoid the constant tension. I was 2 years shy of graduation when the bomb dropped. It was a Saturday morning that seemed like any other until Dad found the bank statements. The air was thick with tension as he spread them across the kitchen table, his eyes scanning the numbers that made less sense with every glance. What the hell is this, Karen? Dad's voice was a mix of disbelief and rage as he looked up at Mom. Mom, who was sipping her coffee, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Tom, I was going to tell you. Tell me what? That you've gambled away Ella's college fund? Is that your big plan for financial freedom? Dad threw the bank statement down, pointing at the glaring zero balance. You've not just gambled with our money, Karen, you've gambled with our daughter's future." I was frozen by the entryway, Lily clutching my hand, both of us wide-eyed. This was worse than any argument before. This was about my life, my college, my escape plan from all this chaos. "This is it, Karen. I'm done. I can't do this anymore." Dad's voice was cold, resigned. Dad turned to me, his eyes filled with a sorrow that knotted my stomach. "I'm sorry, Ella. I tried." Within weeks, Dad was gone. He remarried quickly, moved to another city, and started over. He called at first, his voice always strained, always sorry. But Mom, ever the wounded warrior, blocked his number and painted him as the traitor. "Your father left us, girls. He doesn't care. He's not even paying alimony," Mom told us one evening, her tone bitter as she deleted his contact from my phone. With Dad gone and college now a distant dream, it was down to me to keep our ship from sinking. I picked up a job at the local diner, Benny's, a place where the coffee was bitter but the paycheck steady. Every cent I earned went straight to Mom, supposedly to help dig us out of the hole her gambling had buried us in. But despite handing over my pay, bills were piling up, and Mom was hardly ever home, always off chasing her next big score. One particularly long day had me coming home past midnight. The house was dark, Lily asleep on the sofa with books scattered around her. I gently woke her up to get her to bed, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow that she had to live like this. The next morning, still beat from the double shift, I found Mom at the kitchen table, scribbling in a notebook filled with numbers and schemes, none of which ever seemed to pan out. "Mom, what's for dinner tonight? I'm pulling another double, and I won't have time to cook," I asked, hoping for once she'd taken care of something, anything. She didn't look up, just kept on scribbling. "Don't eat here, eat at work. And you should get Lily a job there too. We could use the extra money." Her words hit me like a slap. "Are you serious? She's only 14, Mom. And my job is to make sure she doesn't have to work, that she gets to be a kid as long as she can." Mom shrugged, still not looking at me. "Needs must, Ella. We're drowning here." That evening, after my shift, I spotted Mom outside a flashy new casino downtown. She was arguing with a bouncer, her face flushed and angry as she was escorted out. "Mom," I called out, running over. "What are you doing?" She rounded on me, her eyes wild. "I was so close, Ella. I have a system, downloaded it off the net. It's foolproof, Ella. I just need to tweak it a bit, and then we'll be rolling in it. You think you're gonna win big, but it's all a scam. It's designed to make you lose, Mom. The house always wins, not us." She scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, and you know better? Working at a diner is gonna save us? At least it's real money, Mom. It's honest work, not this fantasy you're chasing. You're addicted." Mom's face hardened. "I'm not addicted. I'm trying to fix our lives. You'll see. Tomorrow, I'll prove it." With that, she stormed off, leaving me standing alone on the street. I walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. I had to accept it, Mom wasn't going to change. It was up to me to keep Lily safe and try to scrape together some semblance of a future. But as I unlocked our front door to the sight of bills and final notices stacked up, I couldn't help but feel we were one losing hand away from losing everything. With Lily's birthday coming up, I threw myself into extra shifts at the diner. She had been upset lately, feeling left out because her clothes weren't as nice as her classmates. I wanted to buy her something special, something beautiful that would make her feel confident and happy on her day. I had a little box, a plain, old shoebox, where I stashed away every extra dollar I could spare. I hid it well under my bed, buried beneath winter clothes and old notebooks. It was supposed to be a surprise, a good surprise, not like the ones Mom kept springing on us. 2 days before Lily's birthday, while I was at work, I got a frantic text from her. It just read, "Come home now, it's Mom." My stomach dropped. I swapped shifts with a friend and rushed home, my mind racing with what could have gone wrong this time. I arrived to shouting, The front door was open, and I could hear Mom's voice booming from inside my room. As I stepped in, the scene before me was chaos. Clothes and papers were strewn everywhere, and there was Mom, holding the shoebox, her face twisted in anger. "You selfish little rat," Mom was screaming as I walked in. "Stealing from your own family, hoarding money like it's all yours." "What? No, Mom, let me explain," I tried, but she cut me off. "Explain? Explain how you hide money while we're drowning in debt. You think you're better than me? That you can just do whatever you want? That money was for Lily, for her birthday." I shouted back, trying to make her understand, but it was like talking to a storm. Lily was crying by the doorway, her small frame shaking. "Mom, please, Ella was doing it for me, for my birthday." Mom turned on her, eyes blazing. "Oh, so you knew? Great. Both my daughters are conspiring against me. What a great family I have." "It's not like that, Mom. We just wanted—" Lily tried to speak, but Mom wasn't having any of it. "I can't trust either of you." Mom threw the box down, and the few bills fluttered to the floor. "Get out. If you're going to steal from me, then you can't stay here." So, we packed, tears and silence filling the space between us. We grabbed what we could, clothes, a few books, anything that felt necessary. As we stepped out, I looked back to see Mom drawing the curtains sharply, blocking us from view. Her final gesture of shutting us out. Lily clutched her small bag tightly, her eyes large and worried in the dim street light. "Ella, we should call Dad," she murmured, her voice a mixture of hope and fear. I hesitated, the old bitterness and Mom's harsh words about Dad abandoning us echoing in my head. But desperation clawed at my chest, and the reality was, we had nowhere else to go. "Okay," I said, finally, pulling out my battered phone, scrolling through contacts I hadn't touched in years. Finding his number felt like unearthing a relic from another life. My thumb hovered over the call button, a lifeline so desperately needed, yet so heavy with past grievances. I pressed call, before I could change my mind. The line clicked, and then his voice, warm and unfamiliar, filled my ear. "Hello? Dad, it's Ella, and Lily. We need help," I blurted out, the words tumbling in a rush. "Mom, she kicked us out. We have nowhere to go." There was a pause, heavy and thick. Then, softly but firmly, he said, "I'm sending you money for train tickets right now. Come to me. We'll figure this out together." True to his word, the money came through minutes later. We booked tickets for the next train to where Dad lived, a city that felt worlds away from our troubles, but in reality, was just a few hours by rail. The train ride was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. Upon arriving, the sight of Dad waiting at the station, his face lined with concern, was almost too much. He looked the same, yet so different. Beside him stood his new wife, Claire, her smile warm but cautious. "Dad," I managed, my voice thick as he pulled us into a tight hug. "Let's get you girls home," he said, leading us to his car. At the house, a modest but welcoming place, we sat down in the living room, the air filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Dad's wife excused herself, leaving us to talk. It was then, in the soft light of the living room, that we poured out everything, the fights, the schemes, the eviction. Dad listened, his expression growing darker with each word. When we finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out, taking both my hands in his. "I didn't know," he said quietly, his voice heavy with guilt. "I've been sending money for alimony and your education every month. I had no idea that you were going through all this." Lily and I exchanged glances, the pieces clicking into place, the missing money, the lies. It was too much to take in all at once. "I'm sorry," Dad continued, his eyes moist. "I should have seen through it. I should have been there." "It's not your fault, Dad," I said, feeling the weight lift slightly with each word spoken. "We're here now. That's what matters." Dad nodded, squeezing my hands. "You're right. And I'll make it right. Ella, we'll get you enrolled in college. And Lily, there's a great school just a few blocks from here. You'll like it, I promise. The relief was palpable, both of us letting out breaths we hadn't realized we'd been holding. Lily leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Dad in a fierce hug. I joined in, and for a moment, the world didn't seem so cold and harsh. The next morning, gathered around the breakfast table in Dad's kitchen, the sunlight spilled over like a promise. Claire, who I learned was a lawyer, brewed coffee while chatting about the local school system, her voice smooth and reassuring. So, you girls will be needing some guidance, Claire began, pouring herself a cup. Your fathers told me everything, and I want you to know I'm here to help, legally, personally, whatever you need. Lily, munching on her toast, looked up with a hopeful glance. Does that mean you can stop Mom from? Her voice trailed off, but the question hung in the air, heavy and fraught with past pains. Claire set down her coffee, her expression serious yet kind. Yes, Lily. I'm going to make sure she can't pull you back into that mess. We're filing for full custody and ensuring the alimony will no longer fall into unreliable hands. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, plans for the school year, and my college prep. I had started reading again, dusting off old textbooks and filling my head with knowledge that had nothing to do with survival. It felt strange, yet exhilarating. Lily got enrolled in a nearby school and, with Claire's help, started in fresh, new clothes that made her beam with confidence each morning she set off. 3 months after our world turned upside down, while I was deep in a study session, my phone rang. Seeing Mom's number flash on the screen churned my stomach. Ella? Mom's voice was shrill, frantic. They took her from me, Ella. They say I can't be Lily's mother anymore. And they want the alimony back, the money they claim I stole. Her words, once capable of manipulating my emotions, now fell flat, filtered through the clarity of distance and truth. Mom, you did take that money. Money that was meant for us, for our future. You used us. Mom's voice turned harsh, venomous. Ungrateful girl. You come back here and work, pay off these debts. It's the least you owe me. I felt the old pull, the trained instinct to soothe, to placate. But I wasn't that person anymore. No, Mom. I don't owe you anything. Dad's been paying you for years, and you lied to us, to everyone. I'm done. I hung up before she could respond, before I could hear the sobbing or the anger that might pull me back in. Turning off my phone, I sat for a moment in the quiet of Dad's study, the weight of the call sinking in. I'd stood up for myself, for Lily. It was a new feeling, scary but empowering. Then I turned back to my books, the pages less daunting now. I was building something new, something mine. The past would always be a part of me, but it would not define my future, not anymore. As Dad had promised, he supported me through college, covering tuition so I could focus on my studies without the crushing weight of debt. Yet, despite the financial safety net he provided, old habits die hard. I couldn't shake off the need to support myself. I picked up a part-time job at a local cafe, balancing work with my courses. It felt good, earning my keep, keeping busy. Claire, Dad's wife, turned out to be more than just a steely lawyer. She became the family anchor we didn't know we were missing. For Lily, she was there at every school event, clapping louder than anyone. For me, she showed up at my college, attending every significant ceremony. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I couldn't help but express my gratitude. Claire, I don't know how to thank you. You've been there for every parent-teacher meeting, every recital. It means the world to us. Claire smiled, passing me the salad. It's no big deal, Ella. You girls are my family now. I'm just doing what any parent would do. The years rolled on, each semester a new challenge, but also a new opportunity to prove how far I'd come. By my final year, I'd managed to earn a scholarship, covering my tuition fully. Yet, I kept the job at the cafe. Not just for the money, but for the sense of normalcy it gave me. One morning, while wiping down tables before opening, my boss, Jerry, a gruff man who'd run the cafe for decades, nodded approvingly at me. You're one of the good ones, Ella. Always pushing, always striving. proud to have you here. Thanks, Jerry. It's been good for me, you know? Keeps me grounded. Graduation day arrived quicker than I had anticipated. As I stood there, cap and gown fluttering slightly in the spring breeze, I saw them, Dad, Claire, and Lily, their faces alight with pride and joy. Walking across that stage, I wasn't just receiving a diploma, I was stepping into a new chapter, one I had written for myself against odds that once seemed insurmountable. With a degree in hand and a job lined up, I moved into a small apartment in the city. It was modest, but mine. Claire helped me move in, fussing over the placement of furniture and decorations. "This is a fresh start, Ella. Make it yours," she advised as we arranged the last of the books on a new shelf. "I plan to, Claire. Really make it something special." Life settled into a new rhythm after college, with my days filled with the constant motion of working at a courier company. The job was demanding but rewarding, and I appreciated the stability and decent paycheck it offered. One afternoon, as I was finishing up my rounds, my phone rang. The familiar number that flashed on the screen made my heart sink. "Mom." Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for what was coming. "Ella, I need your help." Mom's voice was urgent, tinged with desperation. "What's going on?" I asked, though part of me already guessed the answer. "I've lost the house, Ella. The bank took it because I couldn't keep up with the payments. I'm on the streets now," she confessed, her voice breaking. The news hit hard, even though part of me had been waiting for the other shoe to drop for years. "Mom, I'm sorry to hear that, but I just need some money to get back on my feet, to cover my debts. You can help me, can't you?" Her voice was pleading now, the familiar cadence of manipulation threading through her words. I paused, the weight of our past and her choices pressing down on me. "Mom, I can help you get treatment for your gambling. That's what you need, not more money to chase your losses." Her response was immediate and visceral, laced with anger. "You ungrateful brat. After all I'd done for you, you'd let your own mother live on the streets?" "Mom, that's not fair, and you know it. I'm offering real help. Please, take it." My voice was firm, the years of being manipulated hardening me to her guilt trips. She cursed, venom pouring through the line, every word sharper than the last. I held the phone away from my ear, her fury a stark reminder of why we'd drifted so far apart. Finally, I spoke, my own voice calm but resolute. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom. I hope one day you'll get the help you need." With that, I hung up and did something I should have done years ago. I blocked her number. The rest of the day passed in a blur. By the time I met up with Lily at our usual coffee spot, my thoughts were a tangled mess. Lily noticed immediately. "Hey, what's wrong?" Her concern was evident as she reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "It's Mom," I began, and poured out the entire conversation, her demands, her fury, and my decision to finally cut ties. Lily was quiet for a long moment after I finished, her expression thoughtful. Then, she squeezed my hand gently. "You did the right thing, Ella. It's hard, but it's right. She's not the person we once loved. She's made her choices." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "It hurts, Lil. It feels like I'm abandoning her, but I know she's abandoned herself a long time ago. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that save us," Lily said softly, wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. "You're choosing not to drown with her. We have our own lives to live." Her words settled something deep within me. I was tired of the cycle of hope and disappointment that came with every call from Mom. It was time to break free, to truly start anew. As we left the coffee shop, the evening air felt fresher, lighter, as if an affirmation of my decision. I knew the road wouldn't always be smooth, but I was ready to face it head-on, to build, dream, and believe in the best of what was yet to come. Back when I was 10, life seemed a whole lot simpler. We lived in a small, rented house on the edge of town, but to Mom and Dad, it was more than that. It was a stepping stone to something bigger, something permanent. They had dreams, you know? Dreams of me going off to college, wearing a white coat or strutting around a courtroom. But me, I had different plans. I remember this one summer evening, we were all sitting out back on our rickety old porch. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across our tiny yard, and Dad was flipping burgers on his ancient grill that looked like it might fall apart any second. "Diana, you gotta start thinking about your future," Dad said, poking at the burgers with a spatula that had seen better days. "Doctor or lawyer, that's where the money's at. Secure." Mom nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Your father's right, honey. We just want you to have a stable career. Something prestigious." I kicked at the dirt with my sneaker, watching it puff up in little clouds. "I want to be an archaeologist," I mumbled, barely loud enough for them to hear. "Dig up ancient stuff, you know?" Dad let out a hearty laugh, the kind that made his belly bounce. "Archaeologist, huh? Why don't you start by digging us a new flower bed out front?" Mom gave him a soft swat on the arm. "David, don't tease her. If she wants to dig, let her dig." "But in her own garden," Dad chuckled, flipping a burger onto a slightly charred bun. "Here, taste tester, tell me if I got the seasoning right this time." He handed me the burger, and I took a big bite, the juices running down my chin. "It's good, Dad," I said after swallowing the mouthful. "That's my girl," he grinned, ruffling my hair. That's how it was back then. Light-hearted jabs and evening chats. It was one of those moments, you know? Where you feel like everything's gonna be alright. "Yeah, maybe I will dig up something big one day. Like dinosaurs or treasure," I said, feeling bolder. "Treasure, huh?" Dad laughed again. "Just don't go digging under the house. The only thing you'll find is old plumbing." We all laughed together, the sound mingling with the chirping of the crickets as the sky turned a deep shade of purple. Those nights on the porch were my favorite. Just us, our little family, talking about everything and nothing at all. Not long after those lazy summer nights, things started to change. It was like one day Mom was her usual self, buzzing around the kitchen, and the next, she was always tired, always sitting down. I didn't get it at first. Parents get sick, right? A cold here, a headache there. But this was different. "Diana, can you grab the laundry for me?" Mom asked one evening. Her voice was weak, and she was pale, paler than I'd ever seen her. "Sure, Mom," I said, hauling the basket up from the basement. It was heavier than I expected, or maybe I just noticed it more because I kept stealing glances at Mom, slouched on the sofa, looking like all her strings had been cut. "Thanks, honey," she whispered as I dropped the basket beside her. "You're becoming quite the helper, you know?" I shrugged, feeling uneasy. "Is everything okay, Mom?" She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just a bit under the weather, that's all. Don't you worry." But it was more than that. Much more. Dad knew it too. Their whispers filled the nights, whispers that I wasn't meant to hear, but did. Words like doctors and tests floated through the cracks of my slightly ajar bedroom door. Then, the bombshell dropped. "I've got cancer, Diana," Mom said one gray morning, her words stark against the clatter of breakfast dishes. Dad stood behind her, a hand on her shoulder, his eyes dark pits of worry. What does that mean?" I asked, not really wanting to hear the answer. "It means I'm very sick," she said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "But the doctors are going to help me." Dad chimed in, his voice gruff. "We're gonna fight this, right? All of us together." But it wasn't a fight we could win. Not this time. Mom got weaker, the life slowly draining out of her as if she was a balloon with a tiny hole, and all the air was slipping out. The hospital visits became more frequent. I hated those places. They smelled like disinfectant and despair. Mom was often too tired to talk after the treatments, and I'd sit by her bed, holding her hand, trying not to cry. "Don't you worry, Diana," she'd say on her better days, a shadow of her usual spark in her eyes. "You're strong. You'll be okay." "I don't want to be strong," I'd whisper back. I just want you to be okay. But she wasn't. And then one day, she just wasn't there anymore. After Mom passed, Dad didn't take long to start changing too. It was like he couldn't deal with the quiet of the house, the empty spaces Mom used to fill. That's when Carol came into the picture. Diana, this is Carol, Dad introduced her one evening, a few months after Mom's funeral. Carol was all bright lipstick and too loud laughter. Hi, Diana, Carol cooed, bending down to my level, which just annoyed me. I've heard so much about you. Dad was watching, expecting me to say something. Nice to meet you, I mumbled, but it wasn't really. Nothing about it was nice. Carol moved in not long after that. Her stuff invaded our house like weeds, spreading and taking over spaces that used to be filled with Mom's things. I hated it. I hated how Dad laughed with her, how he seemed to forget the shadows that had clung to him. Life with Carol kicked off with small annoyances, the kind you might brush off at first, but soon enough, they pile up, weighing you down. I noticed her subtle digs right after the wedding. It was like a switch had flipped. One morning, as I was getting ready for school, I couldn't find my favorite blue sweater. I rummaged through my drawers, throwing clothes left and right. Frustrated, I stormed into the kitchen where Carol was sipping her coffee, looking too pleased with herself. Have you seen my sweater? The blue one? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Carol looked up, her eyes narrow. Oh, that old thing? I might have tossed it. It was getting too shabby, don't you think? I stared at her, my fists clenching at my sides. It was my favorite. Mom gave it to me. She shrugged, turning back to her magazine. You need to grow up, Diana. Stop clinging to rags. That was Carol. She'd throw away bits of my life as if they were crumbs on a table, and I was supposed to just clean up and move on. During meals, I began to notice that my food tasted weird. My soup was always too salty, and my vegetables soggy. One evening, I finally spit it out, right there at the dinner table. Dad, this tastes awful. I exclaimed, pushing my plate away. Carol's eyes flashed with something dark, but Dad was oblivious. He glanced from me to Carol, then back to me. Now, Diana, Carol's been on her feet cooking all day. Apologize, that's rude. I looked down at my plate, biting my tongue to stop the tears. Sorry, I muttered, not really sorry at all. Then there were my clothes. Carol took me shopping one weekend, and every single item she chose was a disaster. Everything was too big, the colors drab. These will last longer as you grow, she said, pushing a pile of oversized shirts and pants into my arms at the checkout. I tried on one of the outfits for the first day back at school. I looked ridiculous, sleeves hanging past my hands, pants baggy and tripping me up. The kids at school didn't let it slide. Hey, Scarecrow, Halloween's over, they'd jeer as I walked by, my cheeks burning with shame. I came home that day, threw the clothes on the floor, and yelled. I can't wear this stuff to school anymore. Carol, always lurking around like she had nothing better to do, called back from the living room. You'll wear what we buy, and that's that. You should be grateful. One night, I tried again to talk to Dad. I caught him in the garage, tinkering with some old radio he'd found at a yard sale. Dad, can we talk? I ventured, watching his hands move over the wires. He didn't look up. Sure, kiddo, what's up? It's Carol. She's not nice to me when you're not around. There, I'd said it. My heart was racing, waiting for him to see the truth. Dad stopped what he was doing, finally looking up, but the expression on his face wasn't what I hoped for. His brows furrowed, and his voice was stern. Diana, Carol's trying her best. You need to give her a chance, stop making things up. Making things up? My own father didn't believe me. But, Dad. No buts. I don't want to hear this nonsense again. He turned back to his radio, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I walked out of the garage, my vision blurry with tears. It was clear then. Dad was in Carol's corner, no matter what. I was on my own. School used to be my escape, a place where I could forget home troubles, at least for a few hours. But with Carol's influence creeping into every aspect of my life, even school became a battleground. Sometimes, after particularly rough mornings, I'd hide in the library during lunch. Books don't laugh at you or call you names. But one day, Mrs. Pearson, the librarian, caught on that something was off. "You're here a lot lately, Diana. Everything okay?" she asked, her eyes kind but worried. I shrugged, my standard response these days. "Just like the quiet," I mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "Quiet's good, helps you think. But friends are good too," she replied, leaving me with a gentle smile and a feeling that maybe someone actually saw me. Then there was Grandma June. Visiting her was like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a stuffy room. She'd always greet me with a big hug and the smell of something delicious baking. As we sat at her kitchen table, eating warm apple pie, I'd open up about everything: school, the kids, not fitting in. Everything but the full truth of Carol's nastiness. That, I kept buried. Didn't want to worry her. "Kids can be tough," Grandma would say, slicing another piece of pie. "But remember, it's not about fitting in. It's about standing tall, being yourself." Sometimes, I'd help her in the garden, pulling weeds or watering plants. It was during one of these afternoons, hands in the dirt, that I finally hinted at how tough things were with Carol. "Grandma, what do you do when someone just doesn't like you, no matter what?" I asked, dumping a trowel full of weeds into the bin. "Oh, honey," she sighed, wiping her brow. "Some folks, you just can't win over. But remember, it says more about them than it does about you. Hold your head high, do what's right, and let their problems be their own." Her words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my daily battles. Grandma's place became my sanctuary, the one spot where I could shed the weight of being the odd one out, the misfit in ill-fitting clothes. If life was a game, it felt like I was losing, badly. But then, things took a turn, like they often do when you least expect it. Carol got pregnant. You'd think that would smooth things over, but nah, it just cranked up the tension. I remember the day she told us. Dad and I were in the living room, half watching some show when Carol strutted in, beaming like she'd won the lottery. "I've got news," she announced, her voice ringing a bit too cheerful. Dad muted the TV, turning to her with a raised eyebrow. "What's up?" "We're having a baby," she gushed, her hands on her belly as if she was already showing. Dad, well, he looked like someone had smacked him upside the head, but then he started smiling, really smiling. That's great, honey." He got up and hugged her, and I just sat there, trying to figure out how I felt about it. The pregnancy changed Carol's mood swings into something epic. One minute she'd be sweet as pie, the next she'd snap over the smallest things. And somehow, her bad moods were often my fault. Then the miscarriage happened. It was a shock, even to me. Carol was devastated, and I actually felt sorry for her, for both of them, until she twisted it into something ugly. "It's stressful, living with her," I overheard her tell Dad one night. "Stress is bad for the pregnancy." It was too much. Her words stung like a slap. I was just existing, trying to stay out of her way, and now I was being blamed for this? Dad didn't argue with her, didn't defend me. That night, I lay in bed, realizing fully and painfully that I was alone in that house. Dad's silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The next few weeks were rough. Carol walked around like a wounded queen, and Dad tiptoed around her. I tried to make myself invisible, but Carol would find ways to jab at me. "See what you've caused," she hissed one day as I passed by the living room, where she was curled up on the couch. "You're just a problem child." I stopped, turned to her. "I didn't do anything to you." "Don't talk back to me," she snapped. "Just go to your room." I went, not because she told me to, but because I couldn't stand to look at her, to hear the lies twisting around me like chains. Things got worse after Carol found out she couldn't have any more kids. The doctors were clear, and so was Dad's response when he tried to console her. "We've got Diana, no need to fuss," he said, as if I could be a stand-in for the child they lost. That only made Carol meaner. She started getting more physical, pinching me when no one was looking, leaving marks where clothes would cover. Every pinch was a message, a reminder that I was the reason for her unhappiness. One day at school, during gym, I changed into shorts and a tee. That's when Lisa, a girl I sometimes studied with, noticed the bruises. "Diana, what happened to your arms?" she gasped, her eyes wide. I pulled down my sleeves quickly, my heart racing. I fell down the stairs at home," I lied, avoiding her gaze. Lisa looked worried but didn't push it. I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Later that day, Mrs. Jenkins, my English teacher, pulled me aside. "Diana, I've heard from a few students, they're worried about you. They've seen bruises." Her voice was soft but firm. "What's happening at home?" I felt trapped, the lie heavy on my tongue. "I'm just clumsy, I guess." That afternoon, Dad was called into school. I waited at home, anxiety gnawing at my insides. When he finally stormed in, his face was thunderous. "Diana, what have you been telling your teachers?" he barked as soon as he walked through the door. "Nothing, Dad, Don't lie to me. Mrs. Jenkins called me at work, said there's talk about bruises and whatnot. You're making us look bad. You're making Carol look bad." "I'm not making anything up." The truth burst from me in desperation. "She's hurting me, Dad. Carol is hurting me when you're not around." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You're being dramatic. Carol wouldn't hurt a fly. You're just trying to cause trouble, aren't you? Go to your room. You're grounded. No dinner." He grabbed my arm, not caring about the bruises, and dragged me to my room, locking the door behind him. I heard Carol's voice then, her words slithering under the door. "See? No one believes a little liar. You just made your life a real nightmare, Diana." I felt so alone, so cornered, there was nothing left to do but the one thing I had avoided. I called Grandma June. "Grandma, can I come live with you? Please, I can't stay here anymore," I sobbed into the phone after telling her everything. There was a pause, a heavy silence, then, "Of course, darling. I'll be there as soon as I can." She must have driven like the wind, because it wasn't long before she was at the door. Dad tried to stop her at first, saying he could handle his own family. But Grandma was fierce. "If you don't let her go, I'll take this to the police. I'll sue you and your wife for everything you've done to her," she threatened, her voice steely. Dad looked between Carol and me, his face a mix of anger and defeat. Finally, he stepped aside. "Fine. Take her then." Carol's only response was a satisfied smirk, as if she'd won some twisted game. At Grandma's, my room was waiting, a sanctuary painted in soft blues and filled with sunlight. "You're going to be okay, Diana," Grandma said, standing in the doorway with a smile that reached her eyes. I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I believed that things could be okay. That night, I slept without fear, without dreading what the next day might bring. I was free, and I was home. Living with Grandma June was like being reborn into a world where I could actually breathe. We fixed up the house together, baked cookies, and laughed a lot. She let me invite friends over, something Carol never did, and suddenly, I had a normal life. We traveled too. Grandma loved hitting the road, said it was good for the soul. She even bought me a professional camera to capture everything we saw. Photography quickly became more than a hobby. It was my way of seeing the world, capturing moments that felt too big for words. Years slipped by, happy and full, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. Dad never called, never sent birthday wishes. It was as if I'd vanished from his life, which was fine by me. I had Grandma, and that was enough. But then, Grandma got sick, her heart giving out after a lifetime of giving everything to everyone else. When she passed, it felt like losing my anchor. I organized the funeral with her close friend, Mrs. Avery, who knew just how much Grandma had meant to me. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences, a soft murmur of sadness that matched the gray sky overhead. But then, Dad and Carol showed up, their faces strangely bright, almost eager. It sickened me. As people started leaving, Dad and Carol lingered, and we ended up at Grandma's house. That's when Carol, ever the viper, told me to pack up my things. "This house now belongs to your father," she sneered, eyeing the place like it was a cash register ready to pop open. Dad was inspecting the walls, the cabinets, nodding along like he was already planning renovations. "Yeah, Diana, pack your things and get out of here." I couldn't help but laugh. They both frowned. "What's so funny?" Dad asked, his tone sharp. "Grandma knew you might pull something like this," I said, pulling out the will from my bag. "She left everything to me, the house, the money, everything. It's all in my name." The color drained from their faces. It was the most satisfying thing I'd seen in years. Dad recovered first, a greedy glint in his eye. "Well, then, as your father, I'll just have to manage that inheritance for you." Carol was nodding, almost drooling with anticipation. "Think of what I could do with that money. A new car, some work done to keep me looking young." I cut them off with another laugh, louder this time. "Manage my inheritance? Dad, you're so out of the loop you didn't even realize I turned 18 last month. I'm my own guardian now. Legally, I control everything." Their jaws dropped. It was comic, really. They tried to argue, to beg, but I was done. I'd had years of their neglect and cruelty, years to build up the strength Grandma had nurtured in me. "Out. Now," I said, my voice firm, echoing through the empty halls of a house that had never felt more like a fortress. They left, Carol spitting insults over her shoulder, Dad's shoulders slumped in defeat. The door slammed shut, and the sound was like the closing of a long, painful chapter of my life. 10 years had woven themselves into the fabric of my life seamlessly. I was 28 now, living the kind of life Grandma June would have been proud of. I worked as a lawyer at one of the city's most prestigious firms, a dream my mother had harbored for me. My days were filled with briefs, courtrooms, and justice. My life was full, fulfilling, and most importantly, it was mine. One evening, as I was wrapping up a particularly challenging case file, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and hesitating only for a moment, I answered. "Diana." The voice was unmistakably Dad's, strained and rough as if each word was a struggle. "I need your help." The voice from my past, not heard for a decade, dropped like a stone in my stomach. "Look, we're in a bit of a situation here. Carol and we've hit a rough patch financially. We need some help, some money to get out of debt. It's urgent." I paused, taking a moment to process the nerve, the audacity. Memories, dark and dusty, filtered back through the recesses of my mind. "You must be joking," I said finally, my voice cold and even. "After everything, you call me for money?" In the background, I could hear Carol's voice, shrill and panicky. "Tell her she owes us, after everything we've done for her." I couldn't help but laugh, short and humorless. "Oh, you? For what, exactly? For throwing me out? For siding with Carol over your own daughter?" There was a pause on the line, a crackle of tension. Then Carol was back, her voice cutting through. "You'll regret this. We'll take you to court. We'll get our alimony." That only made me laugh again, harder this time. "Carol, I'm a lawyer. Remember? You have no grounds for alimony, and frankly, you have no idea who you're dealing with. You renounced any claim to me when Grandma became my guardian. Legally, you're nothing to me." Dad tried again, desperation seeping through. "Diana, please." But I was done. "No. You made your choice years ago. Live with it. Goodbye, Dad." I hung up, my heart pounding, but my decision was clear. I blocked the number immediately, leaning back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As I turned back to my desk, my eyes caught the framed photo of Grandma and me, taken on one of our many trips, a reminder of where I came from and the strength I carried. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, because I knew no matter what came my way, I was ready.